Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CDH. I'm one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Matt, aka Null.
Yo.
Reed, aka Sick Robot.
Hey, how you doing?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
What's up, everyone?
And in this episode, we're going to be covering the ban list. Oh, dude, how long? How long have people been waiting for this one? I feel like
how late are we on this one? Oh my god.
Well, to be fair, we thought it would be too touchy of a subject when the whole Flash stuff was going on.
And we sort of thought that we should probably research it a bit. And then we realized that it was way more entertaining to give our hot takes on it.
Yeah.
Where people were like the format splitting was a reasonable concern, and it felt a bit tone deaf to be talking about what we think should be banned and alternate ban lists and blah blah blah.
I wouldn't split the format, but if I were to,
but now it's shitpost o'clock. The gates have opened.
Great. Very, very exciting topic. But before we get into that, what have you guys been doing since the last episode?
I've been trying to keep up with way too many online games. Far too many at once. It's not been a great time. I had to split my time fairly effectively. Good stuff.
Yeah, I've been consistently getting to the level 75, 85 range in Path, and my characters have been ripping, so I'm on my fifth this league, so
oh no.
Not the best.
I've been going ham on Vintage Cube.
Yeah, you have.
Oh man.
Drafting up a storm.
Oh, I drafted this incredibly weird but great deck with a friend that was green-black Reanimator.
Oh, I think I've drafted Green-Black Reanimator once, and it was very good. It performed very well for me.
It's actually it's actually surprisingly good when you have a Sylvan library and a bunch of the Green-Black removals, so Assassin's Trophy, Pernicious Deed, stuff like that.
Well, my list turned into Green-Black Reanimator. I started as drafting Green Ramp, and then I just got a bunch of Reanimator cards.
Oh, sure.
And the good thing about the Green-Black Reanimator list when you get stuff like Raphaelos or whatever is that you can actually cast your Reanimator threats, right?
Yeah, true. I mean, that also lets you go into Eureka at some point if you really want to go in on it.
I love that card.
I drafted a super memey storm deck that was just missing a couple things that would have made it all very easy. And so it was a lot of work every game, but in the last game, I put 715 points of expansion explosion on the stack, and that felt good.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't been jamming too much EDH lately. I've been trying to putting a bunch of my decks and lists through a rebuild, and all my decks or my paper decks are in a state of medium to incomplete assembly. So
shame on you for actually taking time out of jamming to maintain lists that need maintaining.
Yeah, so hopefully I'll be done that soon, but I am super slow about that, so I want to be jamming some games again with some fresh lists.
We've also been working to restore our honor in the Nexus Super League.
Oh my god, have we been working hard at that one?
You guys have been doing all right.
Last episode we were 1-5, and now we're 3-7.
Nice.
Which is better.
Much better,
sure.
yeah.
Definitely 100% better, yeah.
It's a lot better.
I have one last game to prove my worth.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, we're kicking him off the team.
And I'm playing the Kenrith ball of cards that we had to put into the deck, so hopefully I just get
M21 cards.
Yeah, hopefully I just get the turn 2 console win.
You got it. I believe in you.
Okay, well, without further ado, let's jump into housekeeping. And as always, in housekeeping, we cover our new patrons. And today, we have one new patron. So big shout out to Kevin B. Say it.
You rock.
You are a rock.
Yeah. That's a good spell.
You are the rock.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it for housekeeping, and we've got a few new developments. So first off, Reed, you can get this one since this is kind of your shtick.
Sure. At the time we're recording, we have recently updated the decklist database. We're actually moving to a more monthly schedule, which is neat. definitely better because we had one update recently where we had to sift through about 150 entries
Oof.
for a single update. Which
But Reed, did you add my
That's fine.
pet deck to recommended yet?
Dude, when is Goreclaw Stompy Storm going to get off the meme page into the real list?
Can you add my deck that's 2 cards off the main list as an alternate list?
Oh, if it's that, then it's just painful.
No, actually, Reed, I would like my deck that is 2 cards off the main list to be a separate entry completely, please.
Oh yeah, sure. And even though the main list isn't recommended, I want my list to be recommended, right?
Man.
You just don't get how special it is. You just don't get it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, so if people haven't known, we've been bringing on new people. We recently brought on Sinestra, who is very active as a mentor in the CDH Discord. Super great guy.
Top
Very
tier keyboard masher.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I definitely respect his opinions on a lot of decks and a lot of choices and stuff like that, and that's why we brought him on, or at least partially why we brought him on. So that's been a big help. And yeah, we've also, we've started putting in some work to set up some, guidelines and stuff for review processes and such, which is nice. And also we've got Average Dragon back. Yay! So we actually have our web developer back, so we can actually update the site for once. Because, oh my god, has it been annoying not being able to get updates onto the site. Or, actually getting, UI updates, so sick. I don't know if this is actually public yet. I'll say it anyway.
Pretend it is, yeah.
Yeah, we're working on a full overhaul for the UI and getting a full, basically new website up. So we're working on that, and that'll be up in a bit. So keep your eyes peeled because that's gonna be great, and it's gonna have a bunch more options and be a lot more usable.
Awesome.
Down with that. It's already pretty usable.
Morgan, you've got 2 points on here to cover from the subreddit.
Sure do. So the first was an update to the CEDH metagame project V2 by Squirrel Mob. So he's made a form where people can submit their games with some information about them. And it's definitely provides some very interesting data. And, we just get to, we get to see, how certain decks are performing, and there's certain things it tracks what turn games are ending on and how that interacts with, things like seeding order. And there's a lot of interesting takeaways. Some stuff based on the sample size and how noisy the data might be, it's, you can't necessarily draw conclusions. But, if a deck has 100 and some odd games played on it, you start to get a pretty good sense of how well it actually performs. And there's definitely some cool stuff. Some of the decks that are seeing a lot of play and some of the decks that are doing really well, might not be what you'd expect, but I'd encourage you to go check it out if you're interested in data analysis and, the metagame overall rather than your sort of more local one. And also, I encourage everyone, even though I'm kind of a hypocrite because I'm often too lazy to do it myself, I do encourage everyone to submit their games to the form, which we'll make sure to link in the description, because more data can only let us draw stronger and better conclusions.
And I think I do this every time, but I do really want to stress the importance of just how cool having turn data and seeding data is, because you don't really we haven't really been capturing that in a lot of rank ladders and stuff like that. So having real solid data on how seeding affects win rates and all that kind of stuff is really interesting, really important. Also,
the matchup data I find very interesting.
Well,
I kind of skim through for read stuff on GitRog because duh. And seeing that GitRog apparently has, kind of a standard matchup against everything except, a detrimental matchup against Kess based off this, relatively small sample size, kind of makes sense if Kess is doing some Clasms or something like that. But
yeah, Clasms and counterspells sounds like a bad time for GitRog.
Yeah, I don't know. I found that to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think like certainly I've seen people, use it to draw like very strong conclusions, and I would definitely caution against that because first of all, people I think are overzealous about dismissing things based on sample size, but particularly when you start looking at matchup data, having 10 games played of deck A against deck B is like sample size is a very real concern there.
Mm-hmm.
But also we don't necessarily know how much the data might be skewed by like certain groups that are reporting and player skill and even potential recording biases like people who only record games that they win.
I mean, if I was submitting my games, the GitRog win rate would be at least 10% higher. So,
I mean, what would be actually what might be an interesting thing to add to the form would be to like essentially just asking if the person reporting is the person who won. Like, because I wonder what percentage of the games are reported by the.
It's actually a really good idea. Yeah,
yeah,
or a really interesting idea.
And it is also possible that groups just like if everyone in a group submits, you might just say like, oh, whoever wins will record it or whatever. But like, it is also possible that there are some people who their play group doesn't record as a matter of course, and they record the games they win.
Yeah.
But,
cool. And the last thing from the subreddit?
The last thing is an update to Playing with Power's competitive EDH staples list. And there's some really... So this is they look at decks in the deck list database, and then they just sort of aggregate all the cards and look at sort of the most popular ones. And we've seen a big uptick in Breach and Brain Freeze and Savine's Reclamation. So those are all seeing a lot more play recently. The last update was in May, which was pretty shortly after the Flash ban. So yeah, now that's people are sort of shifting. I've seen a lot of that, and a lot of of the more like dockside stormy type lists like Blue Farm, and different takes on that style of deck I think are becoming more popular. Snap was also added in, which is obviously a card that people are playing to abuse dockside even harder. A big drop in the use of Jace, Wielder of Mysteries,
which is super interesting.
I mean, I think people are actually coming to the realization that you don't need it in a lot of decks. Like in decks that have consult lines and then one other win, you don't need Jace a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now that Rest in Peace is like a much less prevalent card that people are looking to play.
Definitely true. There's a lot less Grave Hate now.
Yeah, so although I don't know if people continue to just be playing these like Wombo combo Breach Brain Freeze decks, like I could see certain more controlling decks that can ignore it wanting to actually slot Rest in Peace back in. But who knows? Like obviously it's never going to be as good against them as it was against Flash, but
yeah, no, 100%, but still,
it might still be good enough. Or potentially Cage, just because it stops Breach at least while it's in play, and also stops like to play creature tutors that are pretty common, Neoform and Eldritch Evolution and whatnot.
Do what else stops Breach? Good old Draneth Magistrate.
Yeah, Draneth Magistrate's definitely a good one against it. But specifically,
we might bring this card up later in the episode.
Rest in Peace, like Rest in Peace, when they remove Rest in Peace, it's still going to be hard for them to just Breach combo.
Yeah, it's very like Rest in Peace just makes it very difficult for Breach to get off the ground even after getting removed, which is
I just don't want Rest in Peace to become a thing because get wrong.
We know why.
You don't have to tell us.
And if it happens that some of your metagame is made out of the Gitrog monster,
and potentially like a Razaketh Reanimator deck.
I mean, whatever.
And like a Hermit Druid deck, maybe Rest in Peace.
Hey,
wait a second.
Wait, I feel it's going in a different direction.
I play
now.
Kess and Anala, so
definitely fair.
Okay,
I get hit by Rest in Peace.
Time to get into the interesting topic, and that is the ban list. So we've broken down the EDH ban list. We're not going to read out the entire ban list. If you want to see what it is, look it up.
Let's just read out the entire ban list
Yeah.
as we go through the categories. Why not?
Reading out the entire EDH ban list ASMR. I know we've got at least one listener who would be interested in that. Shout out
Pretty
to
much,
them.
we've pretty much already done it in the show notes, so it's not that much of a
Definitely,
stretch.
Definitely go hop on Patreon, become a patron, and then show us more so that we can do an ASMR episode and capture that whole community.
Yeah.
ASMR proxy cutting and sleeving my
Oh,
Oh my
nugget.
no.
god. Oh my god, dude. I could make so many episodes of that per
Yeah.
week.
So we've broken down the ban list into 5 categories, and these categories are what we call the fake cards, broken, and this is based on power level. Then we've got broken based on gameplay, the unbannables, so cards that could maybe be unbanned.
Question mark?
And that's with a big question mark after that, because it's like, is it?
That's definitely the interesting part of the list.
Yeah, and that's where most of our discussion is going to take place, I think. And then the last category, which is totally fine. So cards that we think could be just unbanned right now. And of course, I think this should go without saying, but we'll say it anyway. This is from the context of a CEDH perspective. Lots of cards on this list. Have
very good reasons to be on this list for casual play.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes. And like doesn't mean we're like, oh, you know what? Let's unban cards that are totally fine. Let's let me take a look.
Sylvan Primordial's fun for casuals to
Yeah,
play
I
against,
love
right?
that, yeah.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
Prime time. Why you stuck banned?
Come back to me, baby.
Okay. Why don't we run through the fake cards and the totally fine cards first and just get them out of the way?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sure.
Morgan, since you brought it up, why don't you
Sure. I'll start with the fake cards. So we have Shahara Rara Harazad, which
Is that offensive?
okay. We'll just go. We have the first fake card we have is Scheherazade. Subgames are miserable. The amount of time for the impact on the game is just so completely miserably far out of whack, and pretty much the only quote unquote fun thing you can do with this is like pull it out of previous games or cast it a whole bunch of times and literally make the game take as long as possible. Like that's the most fun thing you can do with this card.
Yeah.
I remember. Do you remember, Morgan? We had a VC on, like, we were on the GitRogue server in like a big voice chat session, and we were talking
what
about
happens in VCs on the GitRogue server stays in VCs on the GitRogue server.
Basically, the idea was that you would Scheherazade into a sub game, and then you'd start pulling people in to the sub games using the
with Kindslaver, or not Kindslaver. Two heads are better, whatever it's called.
Yeah, 2 heads are better than and you just start accruing teammates in like sub games.
Soon the whole LGS is playing in one game.
Exactly.
And you're like pulling opponents from other sub games to be your team. Yeah, it's just funny, but yeah.
The next fake card is, well, there's 2 of them: Chaos Orb and Falling Star, the cards that reference that require manual dexterity and also a physical presence. These cards pose barriers for certain players, both in terms of people with disabilities who may not be able to play them, and also people like us who play a lot online, potentially over webcam, potentially digitally. There's not really a way to make these work, and I don't obviously physical dexterity as a skill sounds like not a great time, and also throwing $400 pieces of cardstock at $4,000 pieces of cardstock just sounds like a really bad idea.
Yeah. Also, manual dexterity and Magic the Gathering sound like 2 skill sets that don't exactly overlap. So probably not a great idea anyway.
Yeah, like imagine having to actually like practice your flips for
Imagine having
like oh shit, EDH night's coming up on Friday. Better
I gotta grind some Chaos Orb flips real quick. Get my reps in.
But also, yeah, Chaos Orb is like a $400 card, and flipping it from a height of at least 3 feet onto a table with like duels and like Moxon and whatever the hell is on your table. Just no thanks.
I just like the idea of like you imagine some billionaire like Jeff Bezos, just a stack of like chaos orbs, and he's just going into the LGS to like flex on the pores,
like,
you know?
Yeah, you know what? Let's play. I'm okay damaging my falling star.
Also, I just realized that I think if I wanted to practice Chaos Orb flips, I'd probably have to stand on a folding chair or on an office chair, which would not be a great time.
Yeah, so remember to bring your helmet to your LGS because you might be standing on a chair.
Has to be regulated under OSHA. Oh boy.
Yeah, okay. The next fake cards are the anti cards. Because there is no anti, it literally just lets you take cards out of your deck, which sounds silly.
That being said, I have always wanted to play in like a ranked league where you can anti points, but
I still think that a decent number of those cards would have to be banned at the very least. Contract from below, because that card is so many levels of not okay.
Yeah.
But and then we have conspiracies, which are obviously unfair unless you're specifically you have to draft them, and uncards because they aren't designed to be played in balanced formats. Though obviously many individual uncards would theoretically be fine.
Yeah, I know I've played in
thanks.
EDH games where, you know, someone brings in, like, they want to play with their uncard or uncommander, and it's like, you know what, sure. I played against someone from the Kingston metagame who played against Dr. Julius Jumblemorph, the Selesnya creature that's a legendary that's all creature types, which is like, that's already an effect that exists with God, I can't remember the name of the blue legendary.
Mistform Ultimus.
Yeah. Like it's like, okay, doing that in different colors, it's whatever. And then there's
actually the one that I had a lot of fun playing against was Baron von Count.
Yeah, I was about to say Baron von Count seems like a ton of fun.
But yeah, like Old Buzzbark presents the Chaos Orb problem. Dropping dice X dice from at least X inches. Like, I'm going to cast this for 30 and just, like, literal real world grape shot your entire board.
I mean, the best part about Old Buzzbark, though, is that he was by far the best food chain outlet.
Nice. Yeah, and then the last cards are, we just add these are playtest cards, which again, from fake Magic cards.
Sure.
From the quote unquote uncards from the what's it called mystery boosters. Yeah.
I guess someone else can do the totally fine list.
Reed, do you want to do this one?
Yeah, sure. So on here, this is everything that I think all of us agree on this, that can just come off. Biorhythm, Coalition Victory, Iona, Panoptic Mirror, Primeval Titan, Recurring Nightmare, Sway of the Stars, Sundering Titan, Silver Primordial, and Worldfire. I think maybe the most contentious thing on here is like possibly Recurring Nightmare, and even then, like,
I just
is Recurring Nightmare even better than what we already have?
Reanimate?
I might not love the idea of unbanning Sundering Titan if we're unbanning a card that we're actually going to discuss later.
Yeah. So it's one of those conditional unbans, definitely.
Yeah.
But even then, I don't know that that's actually broken, but it's definitely miserable.
I think, like, possibly, maybe the only other one that I'd consider, like, iffy is, like, possibly Silver Primordial, just because it's sort of, like, a better, what's it called, Bane of Progress?
You could run. I think Natural Order would become, like, legitimately, people might do Natural Order.
But Natural Order is already very fair.
I think, like, Natural Order for value.
Oh, I mean, I was meant to imply that people don't run it, right? Yeah. Like, people don't run Natural Order in CDH. So I mean, if
okay, first of all, I take offense to that. Second of all,
people do run. First of all, Natural Order.
People we respect don't run Natural Order.
Okay, that's that's a separate episode topic.
I've never been so offended by something I completely agree with.
I mean, I guess there's, like, considerations for Sway of the Stars and Worldfire, just as, like, those cards are just, I guess, more Worldfire. Where,
but, like, even then, it's just like, like, I don't know.
There's like, nothing fun happens with that card.
I think if you
But
want to try to
if we're
pull it
talking about
off, and
CEDH, we're not banning cards for fun.
Yeah.
Sure, but just like it's not broken. I think it breaks the gameplay expectations of Commander. Like it's not a card you play if you are trying to win. So like I don't think it's like I'll bring this up later. I'll bring this up later when I bring up a card that I put on a suggested bans list because I think it has similarities.
Yeah, sure.
okay.
So next up, we've got broken for power level. I guess
this is where it sort of gets fuzzy, I think.
Yeah,
And like there might start to be disagreements, but
actually, in that case, maybe we should do broken for gameplay first because it's a shorter list.
Sure,
and
sure.
yeah. So here we've got Caracas, trade secrets, and limited resources. Now, Caracas is. If you're looking in the context of Commander, this is basically like a fake card because it just invalidates the entire rule set of the game. And you're not playing Commander anymore, and you're just playing Canadian Highlander or something basically like that
with more restrictions.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it also just from like a meta health perspective, it disproportionately punishes higher costing Commander centric decks, which is like.
Things that need encouraging.
Things that need encouraging.
Don't see enough play right now.
Yeah.
Like it's
what we really need is
you don't get to play your Momir deck, meta. But hey, how about you pick up this Timna Thrasius deck instead? Like
like Timna Thrasius is literally the deck that's most resilient to Caracas.
No, Inala is the deck that's the most resilient to Caracas.
I can't believe you missed that.
you literally play Inala, man. Like, come on.
You know what's funny about Caracas is I think there's a card that's unbanned that does it almost a little bit more effectively.
Matt, let's not jump the gun yet. Okay. So next up, we've got trade secrets in this category.
It's just like Mystic Remora, but 100 times worse.
When people play trade secrets correctly, like if people are playing fully optimally, this card is completely safe to unban. But people don't do that, right? Like you just can't have it around. Yeah,
like how many times have you just seen somebody in your playgroup just feed a fish? Or feed a Rixtic
Study. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think
like,
Trade Secrets suffers from exactly the same problem as Rixtic Study and Remora.
Also, there is, like, Silence is a real card. And
yeah, for sure.
Like, I think the card essentially says, choose target opponent, they may have your other opponents lose the game.
Yeah.
And that's, like, it seems unhealthy.
Yeah, turn this 4-player game into a just a 2-player game.
And like, maybe they're like, oh well, I have, like their combo, like they can't beat both Abrupt Decay and Dovin's Veto or whatever, and like I can cast both of those. Like it's just, it has like a very boring heuristic that often just winds up with two people instantly losing the game. And that's not fun.
Even then, like it's not even fun when your opponent just denies it either, because then you have to play this card on the off chance that your opponent just gives it to you, but a lot of the time they're just gonna be like, no, take it. And then you're paying. I guess
arguably it's just like a 3-mana draw 4 that makes your opponent like, I don't know, it's not like the worst card ever if they deny it, but
or you drop a Notion Thief and it's a 3-mana draw 6.
Yeah.
Nice.
But it's just it's either boring or unhealthy, and there's no in between.
Yeah. And then the last card on this list is limited resources.
Yeah, so here's a fun math fact for everyone. 10 divided by 4 is actually a lot less than 10 divided by 2.
Huh.
Quick math.
Oh.
You know what the other
Give me a second, we need to work this out on a piece of pen and paper.
You know what the other terrible part about that is that 10 divided by 4 isn't a whole number.
Yes, that's also a problem.
Which is also incredibly frustrating for gameplay reasons.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, you're going third, so you get 2 lands this game. Yeah, have fun.
Yeah. Deal with it.
It's going to be one yike for me, dog.
And I had discussions when people were brewing around alternate ban lists while Flash was still legal. I had discussions with this, and like, there is an argument that, it helps like stacks as an archetype, which maybe needs the help. But the problem with limited resources as well is that what it punishes specifically is like hands without a lot of fast mana.
Yeah.
Which is not what Stacks needs help with, and like not what you want to be punishing, right? Like this is a card that if you are going third or fourth and you didn't keep a great hand, it's just like, yeah, get screwed, like just eat a dick. And
even if you're going first with limited resources, but you don't have like any non-land mana accelerants, and like somebody down the line just has a crypt, it's just like, oh, okay, well, they just break parity on it by default. All right.
Yeah, like it exactly punishes the people who are like already in the worst position. And if you have like a really good hand, like it's not like, oh, you know, they played out all their mana rocks and then, you know, their mana rocks all got sacrificed. It's like, oh, they played out all their mana rocks so they get to ignore the limited resources. And also Thrasios breaks parity on it, which is
Oh, that's
annoying.
Yeah, that's didn't even think of that.
Okay, so our next category is broken for power level, and Matt, you can get this one.
Sure. I think I can kind of blast through this because I think a lot of this is pretty obvious, but maybe there'll be a couple. So
I do.
Black Lotus.
There's like a couple that I just want to like put a quick comment on. But
yeah, sure.
Yeah, same.
Okay. Black Lotus. No thanks. Moxen. I could see the argument for Mox Ruby, but otherwise, no Moxes.
At this point, like Mox thing, right? Like Mox Pearl.
Mox Pearl.
Yeah. Like Mox Ruby is just like.
Yeah, that the other. Obviously, the Moxen are being banned or unbanned as a unit, and like it's another thing that pushes people towards playing more colors, right?
Yeah.
Like
That's
Tim
the
and
biggest
Thrasios
problem
get
with the
4
Mox.
Mox,
Yeah.
and like Gissan gets 1. Like, just no.
Yeah.
Ancestral Recall. No, thank you. Time
So
Walk.
I think I do just want to put a comment in on like Lotus through Recall. I like this is like for me like the class of broken by power level that like if you unban them the format would survive, if you know what I mean. Because like none of like Lotus through Mox and through Recall are like payoff cards, like broken payoff cards, right? Like you're not like the game doesn't immediately end on the spot if somebody casts an Ancestral Recall. It's just like miserable to play against.
No, it's just like
And
everyone gets
I don't
more
know, man.
mana crypts and soul rings.
Yeah.
That's
I think like
I think
so,
Recall like
I think like Lotus probably is too broken. Like it like I
especially
don't
now
think
that Breach is a card.
yeah, I don't think the format, and what I mean by that isn't like it would be like, oh, like it might not be healthy. No. All these are like by definition unhealthy for the format. I don't think the format survives a Lotus, but I think the format survives Moxen and Recall.
I think it's. I actually think.
I
It's
don't
the
think it
opposite.
survives-
I
I
think it
disagree.
survives Lotus, but not the Moxen.
I think it survives Recall more than anything else.
Yeah, I
No,
agree
like
with Morgan. Yeah.
Like Recall doesn't like. I don't think it would see. You know, people would want to play Blue more, but like, you're probably not like tutoring it a lot of the time.
Yeah,
Like it's not that good of a card.
That's the big one for
And-
me, right? It's like if you're unbanning cards that people aren't tutoring for, then like the format will probably survive that.
But if
But
you're,
it's just
dude,
like
if you're playing,
you
if you're
can't
playing
It
Breach,
adds nothing.
if you're
for
playing
sure. It
Breach, you're
adds
tutoring
nothing.
Recall all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Moxen, you're not tutoring for Moxen, but like they just break it in such a fundamental way by pushing everything to 5 color and 4 color that it's just.
I think the format still exists in a form with everybody playing 3, 4, 5 color. It's just like it's not healthy.
Also,
But, like-
I think people would tutor for Moxen. Like people
That's-
tutor for
probably.
That's
Crypt
a
and Soul
more
Ring.
reasonable argument, and I think I actually sort of agree with that in hindsight.
I guess you could use it for color fixing. Yeah. Like you
Like-
might tutor like a Mox Sapphire or something instead of a
or
Mana Crypt.
even potentially like instead of a Mana Crypt, or like potentially a Mox Emerald, like going like I don't know, land gamble Emerald Dork sounds pretty unhealthy.
Yeah.
But
Honestly,
yeah, I think Recall like would have the smallest impact in what people chose to play. It just adds nothing.
Yeah.
Like
I
it doesn't enable anything interesting.
like and I think
it's
like
just
that
really
stands
good.
that stands for like everything on this list, right? Is like none of these add anything to the format that you want.
I just want to say that I think Lotus is more fair than the Moxen because at least
I don't
everyone
think
runs
so.
the Lotus. Right?
Yeah,
like
but
every
Lotus-
deck gets Lotus, and
but
it's
Lotus
similar.
is a combo
Yeah.
piece, right? Like Lotus
Yeah.
is like really
Yeah.
fucking good as a
Sorry.
combo piece.
when I say add things, like I think Lotus adds combos to the format. Like, and
As
maybe we don't
well
want
as-
them because they're too good, but it does add combos. Whereas Recall doesn't. It's just gross.
Like
Yeah.
I think like the issue with Lotus for me is like Lotus is a combo piece that like you would tutor for as part of combo chains, and it makes a lot of combos significantly better. But it's also just a top end draw that you just draw on turn one and go nuts with anyway.
Yeah, it also does make like it even like more than any other card. I think it makes it so hard to lose off or like to fail to win off ad nauseam.
Yeah. That's also
Yeah.
a big thing for the Mox and
Lotus
Lotus.
and Moxen. My
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, we do happen to have one card that can do what Black Lotus does without being a generically good card, and it's called Lion's Eye Diamond.
Yeah.
And that card is
And I'm
already
really
probably
happy
too
with that.
good.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with that, the state of that. Well, to continue, we also
Okay,
have Time Walk,
I think
which
Time Walk also is in a similar category to the previous
Yeah, I
ones.
think
No,
there's just
no.
two-
I think
no.
one Time Walk is very like it looks a lot like one Recall, but
As soon
in
as
like
you-
it's just gross but the problem is that it's not always just one Time Walk.
Yeah, as soon as you start doing
No.
any amount of recursion, it's just too good.
once again, Breach, Yawgmoth's Will.
Oopsie.
Time Walk is really abusable in that sense.
Yeah, like literally 6 cards in your graveyard. Time Walk,
Time walk,
untap, Breach,
walk.
Time Walk. Like that's good enough.
Ugh.
Yeah. Fair.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
Next up, we have Fast Bond. I think Fast Bond is one that a lot of people put on the unbannables, but generally speaking, it'll do probably better than the Moxen in the context of like an ad nauseum or any sort of high advantage scenario.
And also just like the number of wheels that exist in the
Like
format.
wheels. Yeah.
Just like any amount of refilling, it's just too good.
Like
So
it honestly, it's broken with 20 life. Like
Yeah. The life is also just
Yeah.
not an issue like it is in other formats, arguably.
we can talk about this. I'll mention this later, but I guess I'll bring it up now. Is that like we're going to talk about alternate ban lists and stuff, and I'd experienced playing in a very limited ban list environment, so like almost everything was unbanned. So the fake cards were banned, and then some of the cards from this, but not everything that we're going to talk about in this broken power level category. So Fast Bond was actually legal, and I found it to be very, very strong, not just off of like ad nauseums and wheels, but to the point where people were kind of encouraged to play like Crucible and Ramanap just because you'd tutor out every single land from your deck and use it as like a mega ritual. But then also it allows you to do like just strip lock people out of the game, like asymmetrical Armageddon. It's pretty good, man. Pretty good.
that's solid and also reasonably easy to assemble.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Channel. I think, once again, for the same reason, 40 life is quite a bit different than 20 life.
Just a small amount.
I think it's funny to channel into a Thrasios, but otherwise, I don't think it's worth it.
Also, like what's kind of funny is that in this context, 40 life is actually, or like your life total in Commander from the perspective of Channel is actually like more than double other formats, because not only do you actually start with double, you're like much less concerned about damage that like could be incoming.
Yeah.
Like you if you go to 5, you're not just like, oh, I'm dead to like bolts and something else. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's just so many like Channel in
Especially-
20 life formats makes like Channel Emrakul is
That's a
like,
risky
typically good enough
proposition.
because it has the extra turn stapled to it. But like if it didn't, that would definitely be risky. Whereas like Channel for
Yeah,
Going
I want to say that Channel was one of the cards that was actually surprising me in the format I was talking about, because I thought it would be much stronger than it was, or than I found it to be. I thought it would be absolutely, game breaking, but people, what I found was that people were building in such a high power format. Now, if you're just unbanned Channel right now, you don't have as access to nearly the same amount of stuff that was unbanned in that format, so a bit different. But in that format, people weren't building their decks around channel. In fact, most people were having, there was a consolidation of, high efficiency spells just because it was necessary to interact with maximum efficiency. So there wasn't as many things to channel into. The one deck that really abused
that's not
channel.
like what channel is scary. It's not scary because people are going to cast Ulamog off of it. It's scary because people are going to cast Time Spiral off of it.
Yeah.
I just didn't find those, like, the things is, if you cast a Time Spiral off of the channel, the things is that you weren't drawing cards that had a high amount of like colorless to pour into channel.
Sure,
like
but
that was my experience.
Yeah, but just like in the current format where you're playing stuff like Felwar Stone, Arcane Signet, stuff like that, like it's just disgusting. Now,
I will say the best deck that utilized channel was in that format. Again, we only played it briefly, but was Gitrog. I played a Gitrog deck that I just wanted to see what it was like, and I replaced one of the Eldrazi Titans with Emrakul, and I threw in a channel because realistically,
fucking disgusting.
But I did channel Emrakul, I think on turn 2, and I lost because it got Gilded Draked. That was I took out one player and then it just got Gilded Draked.
Like the fact that,
but
fundamentally, I don't think most of these cards you evaluate particularly well when you put them in Gitrog. Like,
no, channel is definitely better in like a like Thrasios kind of deck where you actually have like just an onboard kind of
channel. Thrasios is also like
your fail case is just like you're paying like 2 life a card off of Thrasios, or like 2 life for a look at a card for the most part, which is just like a good enough rate when it also has the option to just go nuts and cast everything out of your hand.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I guess we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, so next we have Balance. I think the card is pretty powerful. I think a lot of people underestimate how powerful Balance is, but also like
I think the card is pretty powerful.
No, but
takes from that.
But also, like, I don't think anyone actually wants it to be resolved. I think a lot of people think of how like some magical scenario where they benefit from a balance, but no one actually wants to go through the hoops of resolving a balance.
I mean, I've seen a surprising number of people call for this card, and like its sole purpose is to create non-games.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Like that's all it is. You're just like, I'll like play a Petal, play a Crypt, play a Balance, like going like third. Like you people sack your lands. Everyone's discarding down to like 4 cards in hand, and I'll play a land and pass, like with Crypt. Like
the one thing I think about Balance is that it does create those non-games, and that's kind of a similar thing to the Flash, which is also in this category, right? Where sometimes it just creates these non-games, right? But there are times when Balance actually does function as a card, and in those cases, I don't think like it's good. But again, playing in that format that I was talking about, it just seemed that the balance, like a deck that's built around to abuse balance, is not usually the deck that's abusing all the other, busted things in the format.
Yeah, but it's just like if you just unban it on the spot, it's just like, I just play some white rock deck and then play balance, and just
and then you lose to like the
Armageddon everybody else and make them discard. Like
I think the other problem is that like as a people think of it, it's like, you're super far behind, so you play the balance. It's like that only works if there isn't a player who's ahead and also playing mana rocks.
Yeah.
Like balance is not always going to be a asymmetrical Wrath and Mind Twist, right? While you're just sitting pretty with all of your and like Armageddon, like it's just not always going to be that way, right?
But if you have a high density of rocks, like there's a fair chance that it's pretty consistently going to be asymmetrical.
I think that the problem is that it's
but you're not
going to
get the maximum value out of it, right? Like
it's either going to be an asymmetrical Wrath and Mind Twist, or you shouldn't cast it.
Yeah, that's probably a fair point.
Which doesn't sound like a healthy dichotomy.
No, it's certainly not healthy. It's certainly not healthy because it has those it has the ability to create non-games, and it's just not like a worthwhile card unless it's doing something absolutely miserable. But I just want to say, like, it's not when I think because people called for it to be unbanned, and I definitely don't think it should be unbanned. and I agree with that. But I think people also tend to make the case that like every time it's just going to be an asymmetrical Armageddon plus Wrath of God plus Mind Twist, and it's like, yeah, not really. That's very, very dream case.
Yeah, I think the problem is that if it's not that, then it's probably losing you the game, which is like.
Also, I think decks that are built around balance aren't necessarily successful when balance is played against them, right? For the same reason that like if it's not an asymmetrical Mind Twist and Armageddon, then it's just an unplayable card.
Yeah,
I could almost argue. I could argue that this should have been in the broken gameplay section, but
yeah.
It's one of those cards that makes you like if balance is legal in the format, you want to play a deck that's not affected by balance, which means you also want to be playing balance. So it just like everything gravitates towards wanting to play balance decks. I don't know, or decks that can just like fit balance in.
Okay.
Sure. So for our last two, we have Time Vault and Flash.
Yeah, so these are grouped together because I know I wasn't in our show notes. It says group these two together.
I
didn't write that
them together, but
I actually do think they go together. I would like to talk about them as a pair, because I think when something that I said a lot when Flash was still unbanned, and people would be like, "What? You're crazy!" But I kind of now is my time to talk about it, is that Flash is better than Time Vault, and people are going to be like audible gasps in the audience, but they're just both they're very mana efficient win cons, and Flash just being the fact that it's at instant speed, like it's a 2-card combo at instant speed that isn't able to be interrupted from onboard removal, is what really pushes Flash to be stronger than Time Vault, in my opinion. Although Time Vault, of course, you've got to consider not just the whole Vault Key combo and the fact that it's colorless, that any deck can run it. So that creates its own set of problems, but also that you create like a new tier 0 deck with Derevi.
Well, I don't even know if that's true.
Really?
It's like I always said, and I'll continue to say, that like when we talk about no ban list, like true no ban list EDH, we're really only talking about just unbanning Time Vault, because like historically, this is when Flash was still legal, but historically that's the only unban that actually matters in my opinion. And from my experience playing no ban list EDH, you end up with 2 decks, and the 2 decks are 5 or 4 color good stuff Time Vault and Derevi Time Vault.
No, see, I think you end up with 3 lists, because it's I don't know. Were you playing no ban list when Thoracle was around?
No.
Or did you brew at all? Okay, because what you get is you get, or this is what I found you get basically Thrasios Tymna. Every deck is a Time Vault deck. As well as a if you're not Derevi Time Vault, you're a Flash console deck. you're a Flash console deck, right? But Leovold is also a deck in that format. It was Leovold, Thrasios Tymna.
Oh, sure, yeah. Sorry. The choice is you're either playing like this.
They're all Flash Hulk console decks, yeah.
Like it's like easy to find combo, which is you're playing Derevi because it's a 1-card combo with Time Vault. You're playing like aggressive combo, or you're playing controller combo. The aggressive combo is like you're trying to draw cards and get there as soon as possible. The controller combo is you're just playing Leovold and stopping them from doing that thing, but playing all the same win cons and staples.
But the problem with Leovold is that it also, and this is one thing I found about that format, and we'll talk about more as we get to Leovold, because I think we all have similar kind of points about it, how Leovold begets more Leovold. Because Leovold is a 1-card combo.
I thought
with
we were
going
to talk about this when we got to Leovold.
But Leovold also has 1-card combos with wheels, right? So unless you're
start this discussion on Time Vault,
it's not really it's not really just a control trying to stop your opponents. You're also
Time
trying to be
Vault creates
proactive.
a very limited set of the most powerful commanders, Time Vault centric decks. If it's unbanned,
because every other win con that we have currently, there are trade-offs and color restrictions, and there are reasons to play other decks, right? Every win con that's currently legal in the format, to different degrees, sure, but there's always a reason to play a different one in like a different color pairing or a different color set with a different commander. Once you once you introduce Time Vault, it's a colorless combo that happens to also be the best combo in the format.
It's also
I think Flash is better than Time Vault.
It's also worth noting that there's triple redundancy on or
tappers?
potentially even more, depending on how deep you're willing to go on the cards that combo with Time Vault.
Yeah.
But so Reed, you think Time Vault is better than Flash?
I think they're trade. I don't think Flash is strictly better, but I think they're definitely trade-offs between the two.
Yeah, I just think because the fact that Time Vault is interactable on board.
So specifically for the point that I was making is that once Time Vault is in the format, so Flash is color restricted and you have to be in like bug colors to truly utilize it. Or I guess banned, but whatever. Doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, that's not a thing. I can confirm.
The issue with specifically Time Vault over Flash, because again, we all played in a format with Flash. We know that there were a lot of decks that weren't Flash decks. Like, I could go on a limb here and say they weren't good decks, but you could. There are a lot of non-Flash decks in different commanders that are doing sort of other things because it's color restricted.
Matt, were we just roasted?
I'm willing to agree.
As soon as you introduce Time Vault into the format, because there's no color restrictions, you're not like it doesn't cost you slots anywhere. There's no risk of like, oh, I drew into a piece, now I can't combo. Immediately like that, there's no reason to play any other deck except for the best like random generic commander you can slap on top of a Time Vault deck, right? That's the difference.
I get what you're saying.
It's a lot more.
There's fine points. Yeah.
Time Vault is like it's just a lot more polarized than Flash.
Yeah, I agree that I think, because everyone can just be a Time Vault deck, there's no reason not to play the best Time Vault deck, or like maybe you get some weird kind of rock, paper, scissors metagame of like the best Time Vault deck is countered by the anti-meta Time Vault deck. But I think Flash, I agree with your point, and then I just think it's a bit of I think Flash it's maybe not healthier, like Time Vault is worse for the format in terms of health, but I think Flash Hulk with Consult just became like it's just the better combo. That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Yeah. That's anyone else have
Remember
anything?
that time we said most of the discussion was going to be in the category we haven't even gotten to?
Yeah, I was going to make
Remember how
exactly
we're
the same
fighting
comment.
over the cards that are never even going to be considered to be unbanned? Like,
All right, so the Unbannables. Here we go.
Let's get going on these.
Morgan?
Yeah, sure. So the first one we have is Irayo. I think this could actually be unbanned. It's not like that. It's not actually that brutal a lock, particularly when decks have like a lot of cantrips and dorks and mana rocks that like you might just have to yeet into an Irayo to get countered to answer it.
You can also team up to answer Irayo.
Not really.
Right? Is it not the
counter the first spell cast by each opponent each turn?
Oh, it's each opponent each turn. I thought it was each turn.
Yeah, no. Each opponent each turn.
Nope.
So like you have to feed stuff into it, which sucks, but like it's mono blue. So and like this isn't a problem not in the command zone. Like flipping an Irayo once is whatever. It is like it's not that much effort to flip, but
I just don't think it's good out of the command zone, right? Like it's like as a commander, you're locked into mono blue. Like
I don't think
what's
it's
your
good
best
enough.
win con?
I
just don't.
You flip Irayo and then you're just like, well, I guess we're here now. Like
are you just a
Abrupt
Proteus
Decay
staff
still
deck?
a card,
Right? Like you're just Proteus staff.
Also, I think to reasonably consistently assemble 4 good spells to cast in a turn, you'd really rather have Irayo as your commander because you're trying to pull that off as early as possible.
You don't need to be the one to cast the 4 spells though.
Yeah. That's why people just run it in the you run it in the 99 and then like
that's the whole
get
thing
into
with
stack wars. Yeah.
Oh,
it's you don't have to cast all 4 of the spells is the whole thing.
Yeah.
And like
we had two misunderstandings around Irayo. Wow,
that's funny.
Great podcast.
I mean, none of us have played with
super
the card.
knowledgeable, right?
No,
so I don't know. I'm not sure I super agree with the idea that the lock isn't that hard because like I think the lock isn't super hard in the way that like Lavinia Pool isn't a hard lock. Like I think the reason it's not a hard lock is just because like you can get beat to death before you actually find your real win con.
I think it's a lot worse actually. I think if you I think if your opponents keep up, for instance, a counterspell, and you're trying to combo off, you can effectively discard a card to lock your opponents out of countering your combo.
But I'm talking about like the actual lock with it, right? Which is you play it with a rule of law effect and actually just lock the table.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Right, like that's like it's like sure the zero combo, like the zero card combo of just playing it in the command zone and getting it out is like fine, and like I don't think it's a good enough thing on its own. I think Brawl's probably just I never thought I'd say this sentence out loud, but I think Brawl's just better. I think Brawl's just better at doing the control thing than Ryo. But I think
also like it's worth noting that there's only one rule of law in blue, and it's very hard to find.
Yes. But I do think I think that the fact that you have like this 2-ish card combo that is like very findable in say a green creature shell.
So
where
Morgan, how dare you?
Both
Drift of Phantasms is an amazing tutor. Okay.
No, right.
You can't even tutor for Drift of Phantasms in blue.
where both like you're playing these two cards where like both are fairly good on their own. Like you're allowed, or you can play. Okay, I guess it doesn't really work out in deck building because you want to be playing a deck.
Reed, did you just say that Arcane Lab is a good card?
I'm saying that like it's reasonable to be playing a deck where you can play Arayo and like you're already playing Rule of Laws, and you just stick an Arayo in there and like, oh hey, like I flipped an Arayo, let me go tutor for a Spirit of the Labyrinth.
You probably play it in like a Spirit of the Labyrinth is the one that stops draws.
Sorry, whatever it is. Yeah, the thing.
Eidolon
yeah,
Rhetoric.
That's the one.
Eidolon.
A lot of confusion surrounding this card, just in general.
all I'm saying is like it's a more true to rule and potentially better version of.
You slam it in Zur, and then Zur goes to find the rule.
It's like a more tutorable version of like Drannith plus Ubermask, right? Ish, like around there.
And, well, it is okay. It is definitely a much harder lock than than it's Drannith Ubermask or like I guess it's a comparably hard lock to. Well, okay, so you still do just get stopped by Abrupt Decay. Like that's
but like it's
always a consideration.
It's hard to find the Abrupt Decay. And like also the whole thing with this for me, I don't want to stick on this for too long because I'm not sure Arayo actually warrants this much discussion. But the whole thing is like it's just they're both creatures, they're very easy to find, and like they're both pieces of this lock are fairly reasonable to play on their own. Like I feel like you're pretty happy to have either and play on its own, right? If you're building the correct deck for it.
And also it's asymmetrical.
Yeah, that too.
I think it's very easy to assemble symmetrical locks.
It's the Drannith before Drannith, right?
Yeah.
This was the
that's a good way of playing it.
Magistrate. So ban stay banned, unban, safe, yay or nay? What's
I'm on safe.
I think it would warrant. I would have to play with it to be convinced that it needs to be rebanned. I don't know that I'm confident enough to call it safe.
I'm probably the mirror image of Morgan, where like I think I'd have to play with it to convince me that I want it unbanned. I don't know.
Now I'm sound stupid for saying that. I also agree with Morgan. Like I think it's. I tend to lean to think that it's probably safe. Although it's not a card that I'd be particularly jazzed about seeing in the meta. Yeah. Like I'm not happy with Drannith Magistrate. Right. Yeah. So like if I don't want Drannith Magistrate in the meta, then why should I want Arayo? But
I don't think this card is as strong as Drannith Magistrate.
No, I don't either. But similar, I can see
like the fact that you have to flip it is all right, next up we have Paradox Engine, which we know what this card can do, and it was very good, but I don't think it was broken.
I don't think it was too good.
And it added meta diversity. It was so nice, man.
It's frustrating that the deck that uses it best is Thrasios something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not happy about that, but the fact that like it single-handedly kept like half a dozen fringe viable decks
just alive,
format,
yeah.
Like this adds a lot. You know how like I was saying Recall doesn't add anything?
Yeah.
Paradox Engine adds so much.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would love to have Sisay in the format again.
Bring Sisay and Arkham back from the dead. I mean, Arkham probably stays
dead. No, maybe not.
We can bring Sisay back from the dead.
Urza is keeping Arkham in the grave. Yeah.
Arkham's
but like even stuff like Jorah, like just becomes so much more playable.
Arkham would be like that one zombie that like busts its hand through the dirt and like is reaching for stuff but can't quite get out and just stays stuck.
Yeah.
Also, I think Paradox Engine...
It's just like got something sitting on top of like it's the plot of Earth, and it's just like slapping the sides of like a box or something.
There's just a Grafdigger's cage over the grave.
I think Paradox Engine was pretty good at keeping lots of artifact based decks around, which is something that I think we've been tending away from.
The meta is absolutely far from artifact based ramp decks.
Yeah.
I do think Paradox Engine kind of falls in the like conditional unbans. Like if there's another card on this list that gets unbanned with it, then I would be a lot more skeptical, but we'll get to that.
Okay, that's a good point.
This one card has like so many contingencies.
So I think
arguably two cards, but mostly one
confident
card.
In saying that we'd want this card unbanned.
Oh yeah, no,
we liked it when it was around.
I think anybody that played with it for any length of time in the pre-pension ban era like wants it back. Honestly,
I think it's just an education problem. Like we just have to teach players how to use Paradox Engine so the games don't take as long.
Please enjoy responsibly.
Yeah, exactly.
Matt brings up the exact point why I don't think we'll ever get it back is because this card is like, it's actually a really good casual ban.
Yeah, the problem is not that it wins the game. The problem is that it doesn't win the, or like that it wins the game when you play it. The problem is that it doesn't win the game.
It's
when you play
really good at not winning the game when you play it. Is the issue.
Yeah. Okay. So next up is Grizzlebrand, and I think I got the sense that I might be on the other side of this from everyone. But fundamentally, I think the question behind Grizzlebrand is: do you believe that Entomb plus Reanimate should just win the game?
I don't think it should just win the game.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, interesting.
I don't even know why this is on the Unbannables list.
Wow, you're really you'd put this on broken power level.
So that's
uber
further than I go,
peppers.
Which is a really
5
interesting
peppers,
stance because I thought I might be the most extreme viewpoint on this in the podcast, but that's super interesting that you're further out.
I have a hard time.
I guess I'm wrong.
Okay. Can I bring up? I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna compare this to Yawgmoth's Bargain.
Yeah, sure.
I think the fact that you can more effectively cheat Grizzlebrand into play and effectively draw the amount of cards that are needed to just win the game makes this on a level it just puts this on a level where if you're not in black, like you're already in black, so you already have the best tutors. Like I think it just puts it on a level where you start seeing the meta shift and centralizing towards Grizzlebrand strategies.
Okay, so let's drag Yawgmoth's Bargain into this discussion then, because like it obviously very similar cards.
I actually think they're okay. They're similar
in effect
once they're in play, but very.
I think getting them into play is a different story.
So Matt, do you think that Yawgmoth's Bargain is just too good for the format?
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
so that
really.
I think that's the interesting part, because I think in my
Bargain's
opinion,
totally
I'm
fine.
split on whether or not Yawgmoth's Bargain is too good for the format. So I think that probably informs my decision on like what I think about Grizzlebrand, because I think Grizzlebrand's too good for the format. And I think it polarizes reanimation too much. Like you lose a lot of reanimation targets, and you're just like, I'm just reanimating Grizzlebrand every time. But that's really interesting that you have that viewpoint on Yawgmoth's Bargain, and I feel like that probably informs the viewpoint on Grizzlebrand as well, right?
Yeah, I think so for sure.
So here's some context. I did some testing with Grizzlebrand, and this was obviously not like a super well controlled test, but I was using my Kess list as it existed at the time. And the question was on turn 1. So like assuming I don't have anything in play, it's not like I have extra mana or like a bunch of lands, which was relevant because I was on cards like Frantic Search and Snap and whatever. I tested, I forget how many games with 35 and 28. Like assuming I was using literal reanimate versus like animate dead or whatever. And of I think it was 20 games of each, I didn't lose a single 35 life, like draw 35, won me the game every time from basically no board state. And draw 28, won me the game every time except for once. So like that, it definitely does just win the game when you get it in play, even without like any sort of, like Razaketh, you need like a dork and a mana, or like 2 dorks or a dork and 2 mana, or 2 dorks and a mana, I believe is like the
one thing about so I'm probably the most like lenient on Gristlebrand, even though I don't think it should probably come back. I think it's you compare it to Razaketh, and you're like, should this just win you the game? And I think arguably the Entomb Reanimate with with the caveat that you need exactly like a turn 1 dork, Entomb Reanimate wins you the game with Razaketh, right? So like that's already something that exists. But the problem with the Gristlebrand thing is that it wins you the game uninteractably, right? Because you're casting spells, but you're also fueling free counter magic, right?
Yeah, it definitely it doesn't have the blowout potential that something like a World Gorger Dragon has.
Yeah, well, Razaketh, you're if you have the dork reanimate Razaketh, you're sack it for your one spell, and you're like getting an LED or something, right? It's like you need multiple creatures in order to have protection with Razaketh.
The requirements to not get your Razaketh swords are like scale much better than they do with Gristlebrand.
And the thing is, like, you can definitely just run like Razaketh is already an extremely strong deck, right? And you could just do Gristlebrand and Razaketh if you wanted, right? Like,
it is interesting
because later in the game, I think Razaketh can definitely pull ahead of Gristlebrand in terms of what's the better reanimation.
Yes,
especially for the current meta where you are realistically, there's a very real chance that you'll be playing Oracle Consult in your Razaketh deck, which makes Grizzlebrand even better, right? Like, as opposed to drawing into like clunkier combos where like you have to do LED stuff, but like, oh, I also drew into my Ewit and whatever else. Like, I drew into Ewit and what's the name? Salvagers. Okay, well, this is gonna get awkward. Versus just like drawing into some mana plus Consult plus thing, right?
I mean, Razaketh does win extremely efficiently with Consult. I'm not sure that Consult is
I'm just saying,
better with Grizzlebrand than it is with Razaketh.
I'm just saying, like, the downside of drawing a bunch with Grizzlebrand would be like, oh, like I drew into stuff that I didn't want to draw yet, whereas now like that's not really an issue anymore, and I think it makes it like more clear cut that like fair. You're just getting access to more stuff more readily without having the board presence.
Yeah, I see no reason to run both of those cards in the same deck when I think Grizzlebrand solves all the awkwardness that you get out of a Razaketh, except for maybe a true like 100% deterministic line where, in theory, there's a whiff with Grizzlebrand.
I just think Grizzlebrand becomes it depreciates significantly into the like, there's the whole meme of attack the Adnos player, the Necro player, or whatever, right? Like if Grizzlebrand Reanimator becomes prevalent, you're assuming you're doing like an actual reanimate, like Entomb Reanimate, and people are attacking you, applying pressure, your win rate can drop, somewhat. But it's the fact that Razaketh, I think they would layer like pretty well together, considering Razaketh just becomes so much better in the mid to late game.
I think you have to have I think if you can draw 21 cards with Grizzlebrand, particularly because like Grizzlebrand scales extremely well with extra mana, right? Like,
yeah, that's fair.
Like, if you have 4 or 5 mana untapped, draw 14 probably just wins the game.
Yeah. Maybe the fact that it's in the mid to late game, you're just gonna have more mana.
If you're like, oh well, in the mid to late game,
you have to fight a counter war to resolve your reanimation, right? And you're more tight on mana. Grizzlebrand is pretty good at. Razaketh really pulls ahead in terms of being able to guarantee that you're gonna combo.
Yeah, I think the band where Razaketh is better than Grizzlebrand. Grizzleband. We should ban Grizzlebrand because the band where it's better than Razaketh. I think the band where Razaketh is better than Grizzlebrand is very narrow. Like it does exist, but it's very narrow.
But yeah, so our next card on the list was Yawgmoth's Bargain, but since we already brought it up, I kind of I think Yawgmoth's Bargain is totally fine. Like, I think this card is just significantly worse than Ad Nauseam.
I don't think so at all. I think the in personal experience, the one thing that's really cheesed me the most with Ad Nauseam is when I get a handful of tutors and I don't have the draw spell or the mana to afford the draw spell, where with Bargain, it's like you can take it slowly and you can utilize your tutors to to on the draw.
Can't be cast at instant speed.
I mean, especially with Dockside in the format now, where you can be like, okay, I'm midway through my Yawgmoth's Bargain stuff. I'm gonna go tutor for Dockside, make some mana, and then keep going.
Like, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to sit here and try and argue that at sorcery speed, that Yawgmoth's Bargain is worse than Ad Nauseam. But like the deck builders, you don't have to have deck building considerations in Yawgmoth's Bargain, and but the point I'm making is that just that Ad Nauseam, the fact that it's an instant is massive, right? Like the fact that you get to play it an end step or time it appropriately, fill your hand with a bunch of stuff, and then untap and have all your mana. Right? Like,
I don't know that. I think that Ad Nauseam being an instant is overblown. Like, obviously it's good and it does matter. I'm not saying it doesn't, but like it's enough mana as an instant that it's very telegraphed.
Yeah, that's always been my issue with holding up.
At a certain point, waiting a turn like is hard a lot of the time.
Yeah. I guess Bargain does get some benefit in the fact that there's just a lot less things that counter it. Right? Like no dispels, no flusters.
Swan Song.
I feel like
so it's better against one counter spell. The thing is that a lot of the things that counter it just counter your protection for it.
Yeah.
But like I think that people, first of all, you see, unless you've gone very deep on designing your deck around Nas, you're going to see more cards off a Bargain. The fact that you can stop and start is massive.
Like imagine if as soon as you hit a
and the fact that you can just play higher cost stuff and not
that's a big one.
Have to worry.
Like imagine if you could just play like a Children of Corliss in a Nas deck where like as soon as you hit it you just get to cast it. Like that's just nuts,
to me the balance between Ad Nauseam and Yawgmoth's Bargain, I think back to just all the games I've played with Shimmerzer, right, where there's a trade-off between how deep you can go in on your Necropotence in terms of your winning percentage versus how much mana you have available, right? Like you have to go significantly less deep if you have access to a lot more mana, right? You're digging for less rituals. You don't have to get like as many cards, right? Like you can afford to stop with tutors, etc. Like I think Yawgmoth's Bargain and Ad Nauseam have similar trade-offs, right?
So I guess here the question:
you don't need to go as deep and get all these benefits of Bargain if you can cast Ad Nauseam and then untap.
I guess the question then is, what is the life total where resolving the spell at main phase with more or less no mana, 95% confidence interval wins the game? Like what's fair? Is I think 40 life is fair. Like saying, okay, if we can attack them down to 30, their win rate drops significantly, or they have to have more requirements. Is 30 life fair? Like you have to get them below 30 before their win rate starts dropping? Like,
that's a tough one.
Because I think that Bargain and Ad Nauseam at 40 life with no mana both more or less win the game. This is setting aside the fact that you have much lower deck building restrictions on Bargain. But I think that Bargain at 30 life in the main phase wins the game like way more than Ad Nauseam. And the same is true at 20 life. Like 20 life Bargains still have an incredibly high chance to just win the game.
Okay, so what about Bargain versus Peer into Depths?
It's the fact that you can space your draws out. Like you can cast spells.
The draw spacing is massive.
So even
I think
the fact that you might draw significantly more cards off of a Peer versus the Bargain, right? Like if you're like 20 versus 40.
Like I think that with the prevalence of top deck tutors, I think that a 30 life Bargain is better than a Peer, certainly.
Sure, 30 life, 20 life.
20 life probably not. But like Peer is also an extra black mana.
And I mean,
it's just the strength is that just like across the board, it's a lot more even on what it's doing for you, right? Like it's a lot less variable in general.
Yeah. See, okay. I don't think we're gonna get it. I don't think you guys are gonna convince me.
No, probably not.
Bargain.
That's fine.
I think this card. I think it's like it's good. I just don't think it's that much better than things that exist right now. And I think ad nauseum. I still personally think ad nauseum is stronger.
I'm actually quite torn on this card. Like I'm not saying that I think it needs to be banned. I'm saying I think it is substantially better at most. At most sort of in most situations, it's better than either of the two cards that we're comparing it to most of the time. And like maybe that's okay.
I think in a world where I'm severely overestimating how easy it is to get this card into play, then I think it could be unbanned, but only in like that severe case.
I'm probably a bit more lenient on it. I think it can probably be unbanned, just because like I don't think it's so much better than Nas that like it just immediately centralizes Nas decks instead around Bargain. Like I think there's space for both of them to see play, and like sure some decks might play both of them, but like I personally feel like it's closer to the way that we're going to see Nas decks play like both Peer into the Abyss and Nas right now.
I think almost all Nas decks should play Bargain, but potentially not all Bargain decks should play Nas.
Oh, well,
yeah,
I think
for
that's
sure.
a given. That's a for sure given, right?
But well, I don't necessarily know that it's a given that Nas decks should play Bargain. I think that people might not think that. They might think Bargain is a 6-drop and I don't want it in my Nas deck.
I think it takes like maybe 2 seconds to think about it before you realize that you kind of should be running Bargain in your ad nos deck.
Yeah, so
like the kinds of optimizations you make for ad nauseum just layer so well with Bargain, and the 6 CMC is like barely a blip for that kind of compromise to have a second, instant win card.
So final verdicts.
Yeah. I think it's fine to unban.
Definitely keep banned.
I'm iffy on either way, leading to unban.
I'm iffy on either way, leading to ban. We got a nice little spectrum.
Hey, nice. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Next up, I feel like I'm gonna be
me and Morgan reverse
Yeah.
positions from Grizzle Brandon, or from Araya.
The trend I feel like on this is I'm gonna be very open to unbannings on
Yeah.
yeah.
This is probably the card on the list that if I was just writing it alone, I probably would have just put it in the broken power level category.
I'd agree with that.
Wow.
I think the one thing that Tolarian Academy has
Let's name drop it first. Yeah,
it's Tolarian Academy.
that it doesn't have is it's not that easy to get into your hand or into play.
Well, okay.
And like you can argue me on that, but I think that's the one thing. I do think it's not worth unbanning, but I think if there's one way to justify it, it's like not every single game is going to have a Tolarian Academy in it unless you like work for it.
But I think that like
the games were
first of all, I think that the non-game factor is very high. Like where you just have like you have crypt into like even crypt into like Signet, Tolarian Academy, like second Signet tutor or something like just there's a very high potential to have exactly like for it to just make 2 blue mana on turn 1 and then get better and better and better and just sort of lead to these non-games.
Even
and then there's
like land
then there's
drop.
the combo potential with your frantic searches and your snaps and whatever.
Even like land drop. Like, even like turn 3 land drop double blue is like good enough that you just play that in pretty much any blue deck, right?
For sure.
So if you can if you can make that happen consistently, i.e., you're playing rocks that aren't just Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Moxen.
Okay, here's my question for you guys, because I'm much more. I think this card, like, I don't think this card's like the impression that some people get when I talk about Tolarian Academy is that I'm like, this card wouldn't do anything. Like
basically, Gaia's Cradle. Basically, Sarah's Sanctum, to be honest.
So I do think the Gaia's Cradle comparison is important, but I'll get into that in a minute. But I just want to ask you guys some questions. So one, would you try and fit this into a deck that's like primarily a like creature, like a deck that you're maybe only running Crypt Soul Ring right now, like do you change your ramp base to be you're fitting in arcane signets and talismans in your like Thrasios Tymna deck or something so that you can really abuse Tolarian Academy?
So no, but that's because like I gotta look at this from the context because of course it's the only deck that I know how to play. No, actually, you know what? No, I gotta branch out a bit. Let's look at this from the context of Hermit Druid instead of Hulk for once. Just because that's the new hotness.
Huge departure.
Yeah, wow.
Why do we invite regions again?
But so like looking at it from the context of like a deck that doesn't, like for me, like if Tolarian Academy gets unbanned and I'm on Hermit Druid, I don't think that I'm playing the Hermit Druid deck anymore. I think that I'm just gonna go play a deck that can play rocks. Like I'm just gonna go play a CST and play Felwar Stone, Arcane Signet, and whatever, some other talismans, and then just go play a deck that can play Tolarian Academy in crop rotation. Like I don't know. That's my view on it.
There's a pretty significant trade-off between like changing your mana base to be primarily turn 1 based dork creature ramp into turn 2 artifact ramp. Like I think artifacts are
Sure, but you can't. There's nothing saying that you can't play good
worse.
dorks in a Tolarian Academy deck. Like you can just play Tolarian
but you're really
Academy.
Splitting your. Like I think your academy is much like a Mox Opal, right? Like you need to have a certain density in order for it to be.
CST is always no.
That's
it doesn't.
Like,
I'm not saying it needs to have the same density.
Tolarian
as
Academy
Opal,
is like a Mox Opal, sort of like how I don't know, Durandith Magistrate is like Caracas.
But I mean, like, okay, like the issue with
like, are you going to run it if you're just running the best? Sorry, Reed, go ahead.
The issue with that argument that I have is like CST has always split the middle on dorks and rocks. And like it's I think Tolarian Academy is just good in the standard CST build without even leading any harder into the rocks. Like
how many rocks does CST run?
Yeah,
I think
let me check.
I think it's also kind of important to recognize that like CST is the best deck that Tolarian Academy is worst in.
Yeah.
Do you run Tolarian Academy? Do you run Tolarian Academy in a deck that's running Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox, and Arcane Signet?
Okay, so
is this deck also running Dockside Extortionist?
That's also
Sure.
good.
Probably.
Okay. So
But like the CST list, obviously.
So CST is on 9 rocks, 10 if you include Ice Conceptor. I'm not. It's on 9 rocks. I'd play it in that deck.
See, I would have to think about it. Like it's not. It doesn't produce any mana. It's not a net positive until you have your two.
I mean,
rocks.
I would,
but also
like
it doesn't have to go into every deck.
It's not a crazy power level. It's not a crazy power level if it's producing 2 blue mana. Like if you get to the point where you get it's actually mana positive. Then
first of all, it producing 2 blue mana is like maybe not crazy powerful. That's very powerful.
It's very powerful. It's very powerful, but I don't think that's outside of the realm of the power level that CDH is currently sitting at.
I disagree. If it's consistently producing 2 blue mana,
but it doesn't consistently produce it if you're running also, 9 rocks. You have to change your deck in order to make that.
But also, you're fundamentally like you're not looking at decks with I don't know, Snap, Frantic Search, more rocks, and Dockside in them.
Yeah,
which are like a very substantial part of the meta.
That's truly when it starts to become like actually absurd and not okay.
Yeah,
like that card is just so many levels of fucked up.
Very, very high ceiling. Like that's
so many levels of fucked up in like Blue Farm, in Kess Console, in like
any Blue Breach deck,
Golos, whatever. Like
actually, Golos Tolarian Academy is nuts.
Yeah, like.
My thing with Tolarian Academy is I think people think the floor is much higher than it is. But I think I agree. The reason why I'm hesitant about Tolarian Academy is because of its absurd ceiling. Like its ceiling is just much higher, like so much higher than Gaia's Cradle.
And it also reaches that ceiling so much faster. Yeah.
But Gaia's Cradle has a much it's just much more consistent, like with its floor. Right. I mean, obviously they both have the same,
but
floor,
I'm not
which
even
is
sure.
0 mana, right? But on average, the Gaia's Cradle is going to be producing more mana earlier on than the Tolarian Academy.
But so, I think that there's kind of a weird curve. I think Tolarian Academy will produce more mana on turn 1, like on average.
Yep. For sure.
Gaia's Cradle will overtake it either on turn 2 or 3.
Actually, I think they might actually be comparable on turn 1 because the turn with 1 mana.
No, because I think there are
fast
lots of
mana
hands that will let Tolarian Academy produce 2 mana on turn 1.
There aren't strong haste 0 mana producing creatures.
Yeah.
No, you don't need to haste. You just it's like a rock, like a Chrome Mox.
But first of all, the fact that they do have haste.
Yeah, and as far as the mana they produce, maybe it's comparable, but as far as what you can utilize on the turn, it's completely different. It's completely different.
Chrome Mox into a Dork into a Cradle is like already a lot worse than like Chrome Mox plus Tolarian Academy into a Signet.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, certainly. I was just we're on turn 1. I was thinking that Cradle is almost never going to be producing mana, but it does occasionally.
There is a point like, what would you rather, a land that taps for 6 green mana or a land that taps for 4 blue mana?
Yeah, that's certainly a thing.
Like, Tolarian Academy will create more like absurd, incredibly fast snowball hands than Gaia's Cradle will, and even if Gaia's Cradle has like sort of that like bulge in the middle where it's out producing more mana on average than Tolarian Academy does make blue mana.
Yeah, I also wouldn't hate if Tolarian Academy was in the format and people were incentivized to maybe run like strip mines or wastelands or something. I think that might be interesting again.
I wouldn't hate if people were incentivized to run strip mines or wastelands, but I would hate if Tolarian Academy would I don't think that's not a price I'm willing to pay.
Yep.
I don't really want to see strip mines and wastelands, to be honest, but if there's an academy, then it's worth it.
Yeah, the problem is that if there's no good target for your strip mine, then the best target is the person who's already losing.
Yeah.
Which is like
that's fair,
which is not fun.
All right. I think
okay. Final
verdicts.
So
final verdict, stay banned.
Stay banned.
Iffy leaning towards stay banned.
Iffy leaning towards I want to test with it. I probably think like this could be.
Oh, hang on a second.
I'm not sad that it's not
with Tolarian Academy. Don't get me wrong.
But if we are going to unban Tolarian Academy, there is a condition, and that's that we can't unban this next card.
Yeah.
This is the one that's the most caveated about what other unbans we're including with it. And it's also Tinker.
I think this is also
Tinker could be unbanned right now. If nothing else was unbanned.
I think Tinker probably has like the highest ratio of apprehension to actually unbannability. If I got that right. Where like people probably look at Tinker like, this is broken, this is not okay. Like vintage decks run this as a win con. Obviously not okay. Banned in every format, restricted in vintage. Yeah, can't do this.
Blightsteel Colossus is a lot less good in this format.
And then like you sort of run through, say you just bring Tinker off the ban list on its own, you sort of run through the list of stuff that you can cheat out with it in your mind, and like you sort of just come up with like the best thing that you're getting on the board is a Bolas's Citadel, which is like
I was gonna see if anyone
that's good. Like that's good, but like it's not guaranteed to win you the game on the spot, right?
No love for Possessed Portal.
Dude, Nath with Tinker.
Yeah, like if Bolas's Citadel is the best thing you can be tinkering into, I don't think it's.
Which, like, admittedly, that's like almost a 3 mana ad nos in like comparability.
Very much not.
Okay,
I would agree with that.
I think that Bolas's Citadel is like kind of just a coin toss on if you win the game, which is like not.
I don't think it's a coin toss. I think it's much worse than 50-50.
Yeah, me too.
I guess it depends on if you've played a land or not.
It's a natural 20 roll, though. It's better than that, but yeah.
Like, I think I don't necessarily know that Tinker is like too strong or that it would create like a meta dominant deck. I don't think it leads to good gameplay, though.
I think a lot of decks would find a spot for Tinker, and they would look at higher costed artifacts that they've disregarded in the past because of their mana cost. And like, I don't necessarily have a good examples. But just like that, there's like a 5-6 mana range of artifacts that are good, and it's not necessarily Bolas's Citadel.
People ever look at like Gilded Lotus?
But like,
like just those kinds of things.
Gilded Lotus. Yeah.
But like turn 1 or turn 2 Tinker for Bolas's Citadel is like, it's not a fun game. like almost
Yeah, sure.
like a huge
I don't
percentage
think
of
so.
the
Like, I
time.
think Tinker into Bolas Citadel early is like, it's like that's good. I don't think it's like as when we talk about fun games and non games. Like I just don't think that it creates the same kind of non games that some. Of the
I think
other
that
cards
there's
we've
a
discussed
reasonably
does.
high chance that they just win the game when it comes in.
Okay.
I think-
Well, do you ever
I think
let a
When I
turn
say
two
reasonably
Tinker
high,
resolve?
I mean like a quarter to a third.
Do you
and
ever?
then-
I think lower personally. Yeah.
And then if you can't answer it in one turn cycle, then they almost certainly win the game.
Do you ever let an early Tinker resolve?
I think it depends on
No, that's a very excellent way of putting it. No, I cannot see myself being in a situation where I would choose to let a Tinker resolve.
Can you?
And it's too easy to
do you
cast
always
given
have?
that.
Yeah, exactly. Do you even always have the chance to counter an early Tinker?
yeah. So like the big one that Morgan brought
But the
up,
best thing that you tinker
pre-show.
into is something that you can nature's
but
claim,
like the
right? Like it's
but like okay, well, dice to removal. I'm not. Okay, sorry, I'm
Oh,
not going to
copy
entertain that
artifact.
argument.
no, you should because some of
I
these
don't-
things like Yagmoth's
whatever.
bargain doesn't die to
think so.
removal, right?
But so
Steel enchantment.
the whole thing with nice the whole thing with Tinker that Morgan brought up that I think sort of solidified in my mind as like an unfun thing. This doesn't necessarily impact my entire decision, but like as unfun as it can be is like turn 1 land crypt Tinker is just not fun. And it's probably
Neither's turn 1 land crypt risk.
yeah,
Study.
and I was about to say it's probably less fun than Ristic Study turn 1. now that
I
like
think it's
now that I'm
similarly
thinking about it.
unfun.
I think it kind of suffers from like the birthing pod problem in modern, where like you're just gonna get better birthing pod lines, and what are you gonna do? Ban all the good birthing pod creatures, or just ban birthing pod?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is
if
definitely
you're
a risk.
speculatively banning it, then I could maybe get behind that. But I don't think I'm going to make the argument on a speculative ban here.
All right.
Okay,
yeah,
I
yeah,
guess-
me
so-
too, me too.
So,
yeah.
Lyndon, I don't think you ever answered Matt's question. Can you see yourself choosing to let a Tinker resolve? Like you have,
what turn?
let's say let's say they have 2 available mana and 3 or 4 cards in hand, and you have Force of Will and like a solid card that you don't want to, like, not like Thassa's Oracle, but you have Force of Will and I don't know, Mana Drain, and you're tapped out. Like
I would consider countering it probably pretty highly, but it's like so. I'm thinking about Tinker really as a 2-card combo in my head here, right? You said 2 open mana, and like if they're just getting, because I'm thinking of it as Bolas of Citadel, right? What I'm thinking of is 3 mana Bolas of Citadel. That's basically all I'm thinking about. And like what I think is like, okay, what's their combo here? And then their combo is going to be something like a Sensei's Divining Top, going tutoring for a top or playing a top, and at that point it's the combo is Tinker top. Right?
Well,
for Citadel.
Hang on though, because there is like what percentage of the time does Bolas of Citadel let you find top from the top of your library? Like it's reasonably high. Because there's
it's
like you can get stuck on lands, but like you can also hit Ponder, right? Like setting aside the fact that you can hit Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, Enlightened Tutor, Mystical
the
Tutor,
probabilities
you can hit
on
Ponder, you can hit Preordain, you can hit Wheel of Fortune, you can hit
there's lots of stuff you can hit, right? Like sure, but I don't think the odds are it's so crushing that it's not a risk that I'd be like, if it was just a Tinker into like if I didn't suspect they had the tutor or like the second part of the combo, then you know what, there's a thing I might just take the risk, right? That also is to say that it's not necessarily something I have to interact with on the stack. It's something that I can interact with once it's in play. I'm much more scared of like a Thoracle Consult combo than trying to someone tinker and then mess around and try to to do something, right? Like what are the chances that you let a Thassa's Oracle resolve?
Very
If
high.
you have a Force of Will.
But like
right?
Tinker as like a single card thing that's like just a single card investment that they have to cast. It's just like really good. I don't think
It's good. It's good. I just don't think it's like has to stay banned. Like if they could maybe also find Paradox Engine, and
yeah, I definitely agree that like I think it probably stays in the ban list of Paradox Engine.
Yeah, if we're
So-
unbanning Paradox Engine, I think then Tinker.
I think that solidifies
like Tinker
it.
with the choice of Citadel or Paradox Engine definitely
I
increases
definitely
the chance
agree
that
with
you can
that.
just win a lot.
But all right,
But Tinker with just Citadel, I don't think it's
all right.
has to stay banned.
Final words. That's Lyndon's, Matt.
Iffy to ban, but based on conditions. So
Iffy leaning towards ban,
I would say,
increasing in strength if Paradox Engine is unbanned.
yeah, I'd say definitely ban of Paradox Engine is unbanned. I'd say like unban, but I'd be willing to think otherwise after testing.
I mean, I think we're all in the willing to change our minds after testing, right?
But I mean, like
no,
there
I'm
are
staunch
cards.
in my Tinker. It turns out Tinker Citadel is the whole meta. Everything.
Well, okay, sorry, I don't.
But, yeah.
When I put something in an iffy category, I don't mean if I tested it and I found it was fine, I'd unban it because that's true of any card. I mean, I would want to test this because I think there is a reasonable chance that I would find that it's fine.
Yeah.
Next up,
Like, which
this
is
one
not
another-
a way I feel about Tolarian.
Yeah.
So next up, we have Library of Alexandria, and this is one from discussions that I've had with Morgan and.
Haven't we? I feel like we've all
I
had
think this is
discussions
gonna
on
be-
this one. This is
This is one that I think it might be another contentious one because I think that Library of Alexandria is just it's completely fine.
You're gonna
in
guess that
format.
we just-
I
all are hugely opinionated Magic players with years of personal experiences with each of these cards.
I think there's a bit of a different expectation. I'll preface by saying I don't think this should be unbanned, but I think that there's more of an expectation to be playing more cards in a turn, which greatly reduces the ability to keep your hand size at 7. In EDH versus formats like Vintage. But I think that incentivizing keeping 7 cards in hand and having that opportunity is it's far too good.
think this card is just far too slow.
just-
like
I feel like
it's this is
okay, it's
so much worse than like it's very comparable to
definitely
Silver
not
Library in my opinion.
Far too slow.
No.
It might be too slow.
it's the whole issue that I have with it is like it's this fantastic value engine for the decks that need it in certain situations at the cost of being colorless mana, which like I don't know.
Is it a fantastic value?
It
engine?
is.
So okay,
Like
what-
you're not making a turn 1 play if you're playing this, right? You're not making but then on turn 2 you've time walked yourself for the rest of the game in order to trade for a draw, right? Like you need to
Well, in
you're
order to
trading off
trade
of-
Well, hang on a second.
for-
You trade for a draw
I
every
don't
turn.
necessarily think that's like, the right way to think about this. Okay, well, actually, I think if Gracios was banned, then I think Library would be like more debatable. Because I think like you can very easily play all your cards into a Thrasios to rebuild your hand.
Yeah.
and-
Well, also
then
Well, I
just
think
drop
honestly,
a Library.
Timna
is my big
Timna's
Or
a
sorry,
big
or
one.
yeah, like either of the big T's, I guess.
Like it just being able to get
So,
back up
okay.
to 7 really easily just makes Library so good.
So do you think Library is going to draw you more cards on average across the game than a Sylvan Library? And will it cost you, because every time you're tapping a library, it's costing you a mana, right? Every time you're tapping to draw a card, you're costing you a mana. So evaluate how much mana you're spending per card to draw across the entire game compared to a Sylvan Library.
well, it doesn't
Yeah.
like
I just don't think
it doesn't
the math checks
matter
out.
because it doesn't matter because I would play an enchantment that just had like 1 mana, draw a card, activate this only once each turn. Like I would certainly play that card.
But would
That's-
you play? That's a much
that's
better card
different.
than
Yeah,
Library.
that's
though.
way different.
It's
Is
just
it?
so much better than Library of Alexandria. Yes.
Well,
Why?
because that's a library strapped to a personal Seaborn Muse. That's also another thing that I want to bring up though is that like library plus
Sorry,
Seaborn
like
Muse is
activate
nuts.
this. Sorry, activate
Okay,
this
yeah.
only once each turn.
on
only
your
during
turn.
your turn.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And only if you have 7 cards in hand.
Well, so this is like what you have said is you're looking at the mana for cards. So
Okay,
I
sure,
think
sure,
the
sure.
important part of this question is actually how real is that restriction?
I think it's a very
So I will say I tested a decent amount with Library of Alexandria in a no ban list environment, which it's certainly a lot stronger there. Because you have you can a lot of the time your hand is like turn 1 library activate Mox, which is like not really a thing.
And you can you can tutor for Ancestral Recall and get up to 7 in the later game to turn it back on.
Yeah,
Well,
if you're
even
able
setting that
to
aside,
dump your hand and get back up to 7, that's where library really shines. But if you're trying to tap it every turn and maintain your card of your 7 card hand while like still progressing your board state, I think you're screwing yourself in the most important terms of development, which is why I think it's completely okay.
It is also true that in a no ban list environment, those turns of development are a lot less important because everything's faster and low to the ground. But I think that like this card, I don't think it's too slow, and I think that like it is also like maybe it doesn't go in the dork decks, but like there are decks that are still good that can't play dorks, and you don't care if you're like
If you're
let's say I'm
turn
playing
1
Kess.
is,
I go turn 1 library, draw, turn 2 land Felwar Stone, turn 3 start librarying again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario for library, certainly.
But that's also
Well-
really good.
It's good. I think it's good. I don't think it's like
I don't-
wow. You know this. I think it's is that mode on library much better than like a ancient tomb into signet into like a ponder, and then next turn you're like ancient tomb accelerating out a signet on
What?
turn 1 into like playing really effective like a higher cost spell on the next turn, like maybe actually playing your commander or something that has high value.
Yes, I think it's a lot better.
Yeah.
Because
I
I think
think it's very comparable.
I think that library actually draw like 1 extra card a turn is actually enough that you in a deck like I'll use Kess Consultation as an example because I think that that's one of the decks that it would be extremely good in. I think that that's actually good enough that you are fine sort of just playing from behind. Like if you go turn 1 library draw, turn 2 turn 2 rock, and then turn 3 you untap, you draw, you play your land, and essentially you're fine to just hold up interaction because you've played a rock, you still have a full grip. If you don't have to use the interaction, you can develop something else the next turn along with the land. Like, I think that is a very fine
And it
game
goes
plan
for
to
like
play.
most non-green decks as well, I think.
Yeah.
And also the fact that like its fail case isn't you can't cast it. Its fail case is it's just a colorless land
Yeah.
that you can then
Yeah.
cast rocks with. And it's like, oh no,
Like
my card invention engine turned off. It's just a mana source now.
I mean the it's not a good card to see. Like it's not like it's something like a Sylvan Library in a game that's been there's been lots of trading back and forth, or a Rhystic Study. That's something that's going to get you back into the game. This is never a card that's going to get you back into the game, right? This is a card that's you're
completely.
it's really good at the start of the game when you've got your 7 card hand, and if you can maintain that, then it's going to shine.
Well, I think the other thing is that it can like paired with a wheel, it actually can get you back into the game.
I mean, a wheel gets you back into the game.
No. But if you're like behind on mana, a wheel doesn't get you back into the game, but a wheel with a library potentially does get you back into the game.
I think the library plus wheel is like the emphasis is on the wheel. I personally, I think the wheel drawing a fresh 7 when you're very low is what's bringing you back, not the fact that you're going to get an extra card on top of that wheel. Like yes, that value engine.
No,
is
it's
nice,
not an extra
like
card
wheeling,
on top of that wheel. That's
like
not what I
wheeling
think is
into
good.
wheeling and then playing a value engine is like same diff to me. Like wheel and then play Mystic Remora, wheel and play Rhystic Study,
But you can
wheel and play Sylvan Library.
Honestly, I haven't seen a late game wheel go well ever.
That's also fair. I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, and I also think that the fact that it's not like lots of decks, it's not just a slam, like it's a colorless card, right? So any deck could run it. And the fact that it's not an auto slam in any deck, in every deck, kind of speaks to the fact that I think this card is fine.
All right.
Okay. I don't think that that's enough to conclude that it's fine. I think that's like
okay, sure. There's probably not enough to conclude it's fine, but I think that's probably a good indication.
Do you think this goes in every deck that isn't playing dorks?
Probably, because the play pattern you described is something that almost all non-dork decks are doing, right? Trying to hit their signet. So probably, but it's not going to go. I wouldn't necessarily say that's going to go into like a 4 or 5 color deck that wasn't playing dorks.
I would.
I mean, I'd put it in like most Timid decks, like most Timid Thras decks, I think. As also not farm or something of the sort.
Yeah, I think it pretty effectively goes into any sort of Thrasios or Tymna deck. Where you actually do have that late game.
Dorks, which is we're covering a pretty goddamn wide variety of.
So fuck you.
That being said, I guess there are a lot of common cards among the class of deck.
All right. Final opinions, Lyndon.
Actually, I just want to ask you guys one more question. So, do you think this card is stronger than most other cards? Do you think there's cards currently in the format? Okay, how do I rephrase? How many cards in the format do you think are stronger than this card right now? Like rough estimate. You don't have to list them or anything.
I think there's a fair amount of cards stronger than this in the format.
Yeah, I think
not like a lot. Like I think I could come up with a list if I had 10 minutes. Not like
I'd have to think about it.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think this card cracks top 10 strongest cards in the format.
No, I don't think so either.
So I think this is a point that obviously I'm not trying to compare this in terms of degree to Recall. I don't think that this adds very much. Like I think giving
strength to the non-green decks I think that does add something.
The problem is that it also gives strength to Tymna and Thrasios decks, who have the easiest time of filling up.
I'm not sure I buy that.
Like keep in mind that like turn 1 library draw, turn 2 land dork library is it's just not a bad play pattern that we're looking at here.
Yeah.
I think also another difference, which is subtle, is you always draw on your first turn, which is a bit different than how Vintage works.
Yeah, like
that's another
the fact that it's also very like that it still works when you're going first is like
pretty huge,
kind of unhealthy. And I don't think what Kess Consultation needs is Library of Alexandria to like.
Yeah, I think
like that's not. That. I think it needs a tool set that sort of lets it answer stuff rather than like stuff that just lets it draw infinite. Like it needs better ways to like actually set its opponents back and not just keep drawing cards.
Okay, so I guess final verdicts. I think this card is fine to unban, although I've now like after this discussion, I have like I still think fine to unban, but I have like now like a nagging feeling in the back of my head that's like maybe this is too good,
the idea that it's too good.
It's deep. It's deep in there. So yeah, that's where I am.
I'm kind of it's funny because I'm kind of the opposite. Like before the discussion, I was like, okay, definitely don't unban, but now I'm like, I actually do want to give it a try because I think we are kind of at a high level of theoretical thought here. Like I think there is actually. I think there's some practical implementation to this card that might be a bit different, and it's worth experimenting.
Yeah, I think I would keep it on the ban list. I think it's just too good of a generic value engine, but I can see situations where, or like outcomes during testing where it would come out to be like fine.
On pure power level, I think I would say lean ban, but on and adding in the meta impact, I would say solid ban. Like, even if it is too slow, the punish for it being too slow is that you, like, lose games because people tap down early, which is also not something I want to be promoting.
So, Reed, you brought up that you said you don't want another, or that you'd keep this card banned because you don't think another good generic value engine is healthy for the format or whatever. But is there a generic value engine that currently exists in the format that you think should be banned or that you would ban?
I think we're talking about persistent value engines. I think Sylvan Library and Rhystic Study are on the edge. I think Sylvan Library is probably too good for the format, honestly, looking at it objectively, and I think Rhystic Study has a case.
So if that's where your threshold is, then maybe I'm in line with you. But for me, I was coming from the perspective that if Sylvan Library is okay for the format, then
like if we're
Library
accepting everything currently in the format, sure, I could see a case, but I don't think it's even healthy to introduce more of them.
We'll leave it to the ban discussion, but I do think that Rhystic Study is probably better than Library.
Which library?
Of Alexandria. Sorry, of Alexandria. Oh man,
Library of Blank, 100% better.
I literally thought earlier the same thing happened. I didn't catch it until afterwards. Yeah. Library of Alexandria. Yeah.
Okay. Let's actually we've got one coming up that I think I want to move to the very end of the list. So we're gonna save this till later, and we're gonna hammer out a couple ones. Pretty quickly, I think.
So, we always say that.
Yeah, we do always say that. Yeah, so we'll also just mention that. Yeah, we're gonna do this as like a full like ban, unban. Like what would we like to ban? Like a longer discussion, but as we've been doing this, the episode is getting pretty long.
Harry Potter episode
we're
7,
probably just going to be ending it after we talk about we finish up this list. Yeah,
we wound each other up, and we're just going.
So without further ado, next up we've got Prophet of Krufix. Seedborn Muse, but better.
It's like honestly, I'm not even sure that it is.
It does.
Is it better?
It does not have artifacts, which is iffy. Is the big one.
Yeah, although like Seedborn Muse decks typically aren't leaning on artifacts super hard, and I think the fact that you can develop stuff like that, the flash,
the flash is definitely like,
is very
super
real.
I think the flash is huge.
I think so.
Yeah, I think the fact that you can just cast
your Thoracle is now an instant.
Yeah, okay, so that's the big one.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that you can slam this without already having a Thrasios in play, and then slam a Thrasios on the next turn is nuts.
That's
it. Also,
that's amazing.
Insane.
You can also just put this into like any blue-green X commander-centric deck, and then like you just slam this, and then if it doesn't get answered, you can just flash in your commander and stuff, and also have like mana up continuously.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Seedborn Muse play pattern is not like a healthy one, and I think that this
encouraging it is like not a good thing.
It may not be as good, but it's even more unhealthy as a play pattern.
Yeah, this is weird because I think we can probably just move. I don't think we have to we kind of covered everything that's important to cover about Prophet, right? Like, in terms of like my verdict, this is one that's like, I think, like it's not power level wise. Like I wouldn't say Seedborn Muse is like, one of the most powerful cards in the format, right? It's a 5 mana card. It's very good. Blah blah blah. You build decks around it with
basically ad nauseum.
And so it's like Prophet power level wise as a better Seedborn Muse and does all these things. Like, sure, it's good. Is it top of the format, best cards ever? No, I think power level wise it probably fits in to the format. But do I want this card unbanned? No, definitely not.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the same boat. I don't want this card unbanned, but I'm having a hard time like comparing it to other cards that are banned and other cards that are unbanned and being like, yeah, this belongs in the banned pile.
No one likes a long drawn out Thrasios game or a Thrasios Seedborn game. And I have also 2 words for you, Gilded Drake. Like this is God. Like I don't like like that's a card I want to ban. I have the opposite impression with Gilded Drake. It's like a card I want to ban, but I know shouldn't be banned.
Just because you play all these decks that are super vulnerable to
Like, you need something to punish these
I
ridiculous.
hate Gilded Drake.
Yeah,
man.
I truly hate it, but
Gilded Drake.
I think it makes sense.
All right, so I think we're all pretty much in favor of keeping this on the ban list, mostly for play patterns.
I just have such a hard time saying that. Like,
I don't need to test
this
this
is
card.
a unique card that we've discussed in terms of it's like all these cards we were talking about banning in terms of power level, or is it okay, but this is the first one where I think we all acknowledge that power level wise it's fine, but it's just not a card that should be legal.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I can bring myself to, like, go back and forth on, like, I don't think I can bring myself to say we should definitely unban Paradox Engine, but Prophet of Krufix has to stay banned. So I think I'm at least leaning towards unban.
All right.
I think
Paradox Engines, the play patterns of Paradox Engine are far less degenerate than Prophet of Krufix, I think.
I think it
it's just
suffers
a
from the
much better
same
card.
problem. I think it suffers from the same problem where, like, there are players who just can't win out of a Prophet of Krufix turns. Emphasis on the pluralization there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Prophet of Krufix is basically just an active lighthouse chronology.
I was
right?
thinking the exact same thing. I was like,
and we're moving on.
Okay. So next up, we've got Raphelos.
This is an interesting one.
Is it?
I mean, it's interesting.
It's not a good as a commander.
It's interesting the
just
way
no.
that, like, a lot of, like, it has this notorious reputation of, like, the agenda against it is always like, oh, it's so broken the command zone, oh, it's so unfun, and, like, that's what we sort of inherit. Like, that's what a lot of people inherit from, like, casual discussions about this card, or discussion about this card in a casual context, where, like, those
Where playing a 6 or 7 drop on turn 3 is, like, a very real problem.
those specific arguments don't really hold up in CDH. It's honestly in the command zone, it's just sort of like worse Solvala.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's like it doesn't scale nearly as well as Solvala does.
Well,
right?
it's really hard to, like, it's much harder
abuse.
to get it so you can make infinite mana on, like, turn 3. Like,
And
you
it
have
also,
to have
it's sort of just like, because we don't run as much land acceleration, it's also sort of just like worse than Priest and Bloom Tender for, like, a generic, like, fat mana Dorkon too.
I don't know about Bloom Tender, but yeah, Priest is likely to make more mana faster, especially in high color decks where you ideally aren't fetching, like, a triple forest mana base as your first 3
Like,
lands.
Raphael's is probably better than Priest in, like, mono green or, like, 2 color, but yeah, as soon as you start, like, going up to higher colors, like, I feel like Priest is just better.
Yeah, so I actually really like that because I think Raphelos personally is actually a really healthy thing to bring into the format because it boosts the lower color decks, right? Because you need the forest, right? Your 4 color decks, most of the time they're prioritizing fetching, island based duels, right? Underground Sea or whatever, not necessarily like Bayou, Trop, Savannah,
Lyndon,
right? Like, so
blink twice if you're being held hostage by Morgan for trying to get this unbanned for Hullen.
I want this unbanned for Gitrog. Just another good way to cast Gitrog. Oops. But yeah, like double green, only off forests.
It's rough.
Like I'd probably play this as a 2-mana rock and like Gitrog.
It's not even that great in Hullen because that deck has a hard time using a
lot of green
a
mana.
billion green
That's
mana.
It's like a 2-mana.
There's
Worn
a flooded
Power Stone.
grove in that deck for a reason.
All right. I think we're all fine with
Fun
unbanning
pass.
it, honestly.
Yep.
Conclusion,
Definitely
unban.
unban.
All right, next one, sort of weird. Sort of a weird one, right? This one's Gifts Ungiven. And, like, so historically, I feel like everybody's been fine with it. For the most part. Like, it's not better than Intuition, right?
No.
Depends. I think
historically, I think they were very
Like,
similar.
historically, it's not really better than Intuition. Like, it's better than Intuition, specifically Kess, because Kess is stupid and does stupid things.
I
think.
No, I think
But-
it's better than Intuition in every circumstance where you haven't put a specific 3-card this just wins the game combos set up in your deck.
Like I'm just thinking, like gifts.
Yeah.
The
Like,
main thing, like
it's
what are you doing
better-
now? Like breach
it's-
piles.
Well, but, like, it's also better if you're using it to find interaction.
I think
Sure.
Gifts
Right.
works a lot better into a combo than Intuition in that sense. And
Like-
yeah.
Yeah, the fact that you get 2 cards in hand also means that like gifts, as evidenced by Modern, just kind of wins the game with Past in Flames, and like you also get some much better rituals.
Like what do you do these days? Like gifts, Breach, Savine's Reclamation, and like just 2 other.
How about
LED brain freeze
gifts? Or or even if you don't want to go into like setting aside Breach, you can be gifting for like, I don't know, even if you had to do like Past in Flames and Yogg-Will, like, I don't know, Dark Ritual, Past in Flames, Yogg-Will, Dockside, or like, or again, you use it. There's something that needs to be countered on the stack, and you gifts for a counter spell and Breach, Savine's Reclamation, LED, or like,
yeah, that's fair.
Like, whoops.
But I mean, it's still like, it's 4 mana, right?
It's 4 mana, and if you're doing things with the graveyard, I think I wouldn't hate if there was a resurgence in like some amount of graveyard hate or graveyard consideration.
I mean,
like,
I feel like we're about to see
it got
that
to an
resurgence.
unhealthy point.
I think
it got to an unhealthy point with Hulk, where everyone was running Cage and Rest in Peace and blah blah blah, and there's points where people were running like Extirpate before Thoracle, before Fish Hulk. So like things got really bad, but I wouldn't hate to see where people are running some amount of graveyard hate.
So I think that like Reed, you mentioned people were historically fine with this card. I don't think that's because they were misevaluating or not looking at it right. I think it's because Underworld Breach wasn't a card.
I definitely know. That's kind of what I was getting around to. Like Underworld Breach existing sort of muddies the waters for this one a bit, because it's just like, it's just really good with it now. It sort of just like assembles it. Like it assembles the full combo for a single card.
Wait, how much what are the mana requirements on, if you have a few cards in graveyard, is it just the best they can do is 2 mana?
Yeah.
Like it's 2 mana win the game after gifts resolved.
Yeah.
If you get like, I don't know, Dark Ritual, LED.
No, you get Brain Freeze, LED, Breach, Savins, and
why would you don't need to get Brain Freeze. You have a gifts in your graveyard.
I guess that's fair, but like even that, like, so like any blank card in that third slot, just those 3 together with a gift.
Well, like Dark Ritual or Culling the Weak.
Sure,
or something
but even then, like just those 3 cards, LED, Savine's, Breach, the best they can do is put you at 2 mana.
Which is, they're literally giving you the Breach.
Yeah.
Which is,
well, no, they can also just give you the LED, and
if they give you the mana pile, then it's like 0 mana, right? You
sure.
go LED.
Yeah, well, I guess the best they can do is actually 3. No, it's still 2, because LED Savine's, you can play the LED, crack it, and then cast Savine's from the bin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, glad we figured that out.
Did the math on it.
Yeah. So it is legitimately much lower than like it is lower than it is with intuition.
Yeah. So,
and you can still do that when you're using it to find interaction.
So I would.
There's also the meme like Unburial Rights thing.
Unburial Rights is too much for me.
Not if you unban Grizzlebrand.
I would.
Sorry, there's the meme Double Entomb.
There you go.
And the fact that you just get 2 cards to your hand is like very meaningful. Like you can just kind of tutor for like
just a good factor fiction, like a factor fiction for 4 very good cards.
Like I don't know. What if you tutor for like Demonic Tutor, 2 rituals, and a Past in Flames?
Yeah, that gets.
Or like,
let's not get buried, like stuck on taking up 1 million gift piles. Yeah,
I would say.
Wait, but we haven't evaluated every combination of 4 cards and all of that.
Yeah, but what if we've got a different set of rituals?
I'm still leaning toward unban, but it's a lot less clear to me now than it was previously.
Yeah. I'm on iffy unban. I'm sold on that.
I'm with Morgan. Like I think I was much more clear on unban before Breach, but now like maybe Breach is too easy. But again, 4 mana, instant speed. It's like it is interactable. You can interact with Breach, and you can interact at a bunch of different times. And it's not necessarily that you can't. It's not like you can do like a bunch of protected piles or something like that, right? You can stack. You can play around giving them protection. So, It's good, but I don't think it's like unfair necessarily. So if you
yeah.
unban, I agree.
Next one.
I think you unban this.
Yeah.
My
You're
reasoning
like
is
a reasonably solid unban.
yeah. Well, I mean, like a 7 out of 10. Like I'm not quite iffy, but I'm like pretty sure you unban this. I think the breach type strategy, if it were prevalent, wouldn't last very long because it's like so easily countered. And also like a 4 mana card that works well is still a 4 mana card.
That's fair. Yeah, 4 mana is a lot.
Yeah. That's a big balancing factor in my mind. So next we have
And finally,
final.
oh boy. This one's gonna be
sorry, okay. We have a quick one first, I guess. Upheaval.
Oh, sorry, we do. Yes.
Upheaval, the only reason why you would not unban this is just because play patterns, I think.
Yeah,
it's just annoying more than anything.
I think the summary is that it creates games that you're extremely likely to lose, but just likely enough that you want to play them out and they're going to take a while.
Just annoying.
But my Tanawa deck...
But still worth unbanning, I think. Just because, like,
but
it
you still
doesn't...
have Sunder, man. That's fine.
Yeah.
Power level, like, I think it's like people control with Upheaval. Like, they can just be trolly, but people can be trolly with other cards too that currently exist, right? Armageddon, lol, don't have anything to do. Like, sure, you can create miserable game states if you're trying to, but power level wise, I don't think this card is too good for CDH.
Matt,
unban it. I'm fine with that. Like, if you want to be that guy who casts the Upheaval for value, or quote unquote, then you can be that guy. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Or you can be that person, I suppose.
Okay.
Oh boy, this is
unban and then no one play. Yeah, please.
Last but not
like
least,
certainly
this is going to be
least.
a 2.5 hour episode just because of this one.
Yeah.
So the last one is Leovold.
So we've been,
and this is one that's very concerning to me because people keep asking for this card to be unbanned and saying that it's like, oh, this would be healthy, you know, oh, I miss Leovold. And I'm just like screaming. And I'm screaming, and at the very least, I think everyone on this podcast is like in general agreement about Leovold, right?
I don't think so.
Wait.
Well, okay. There are aspects of Leovold that we all agree on.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
I want to make some points. I want to make some points before. So I think historically I've been pro unban, but that was also mostly in like the peak of the Thrasios Tymna, like in my mind, like the reign of Thrasios Tymna, where I was like, we need something to hard stop these draw engines. They're taking over. And I was like, okay, you know what? Leovold would be a great way of solving that problem. But now that, like, I don't think that's necessarily as true as it was before. I think, especially now that Consult is kind of like the best win condition package. Like, I think that Leovold should not be unbanned because it's kind of just the best Sultai Consult that you can assemble.
People were calling for Leovold unbanned during Fishhulk, like the Fishhulk. Do we call it Fishhulk Winter or like Fishhulk Apocalypse? Or
I think it was the Dark Times.
The Dark Times. Okay. During the Dark Times, people were calling for a Leovold unban, and my mind was blown because I'm like, you do realize that Leovold is also a very, very good Flash Hulk into Consult commander, right? Like, it does it all. And it's also the worst part, and I think Morgan and I have talked about this before, and this is the number one reason why I am personally against Leovold unban, is that Leovold begets more Leovold. The best answer to a Leovold deck, because if you're playing Leovold Consult, even if you're playing Leovold Flash, Consult, you still run Wheels. You run Wheels because it's just a one card combo with your commander, right? It's just so free. So you run it, and then what's the best way to counter a Leovold deck that has Wheels in it? Well, maybe if I run my own Leovold deck, then they're not going to be drawing cards as well off the thing. So Leovold starts. You have to. A good way to answer Leovold is to just play another Leovold deck. And anytime you get that kind of scenario where the best answer to a deck is itself, it just perpetuates. It just explodes, right? So the meta would just be overrun with Leovold decks. It's not going to balance out Thrasios Tymna. It's just going to usurp Thrasios Tymna, except now the best counter to it is itself. And like you almost have to run it in many cases.
I could see an argument to wanting to play white into a Leovold meta.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna play Empress Galena and just steal everyone's Leovold.
Give them cards.
Anyway, I think you put that really well. I think I share the same.
Yeah, I think historically I've been in favor of Unban. I think I was in favor of Unban even when Oracle Hulk was in full strength, just because you want anything but Thrasios Tymna mirrors continuously.
So you'd rather Leovold mirrors?
No, because there is a reasonable discussion to be had about whether or not Oracle Hulk with white or Oracle Hulk with Leovold was better. Especially with stuff like Dovin's Veto in the format, Angel's Grace, Silence, having like good proactive engines, and then also not having to cast 2 spells.
Don't buy it. Your engines, how like you just who? So you're going to trade your ability to draw cards?
No, but also
like
the fact that if you unban
Leovold,
Leovold, suddenly there's a dichotomy where instead of just having to play partners and like sometimes Kenrith, because some people want to play Kenrith in that meta, you have this dichotomy where like Leovold decks are probably the default, but also now partners get to play stuff like the partner decks get to play Rule of Laws, and the Rule of Laws hard counted Leovold decks because they can't combo through it because they don't have Nomads on core. So like you get like Hulk Weaver versus Leovold Oracle Hulk, which I think is more interesting than what we had at this point. Though Leovold, no, it's not worth it.
I still don't buy that argument necessarily for the dark times, but again, it's probably like there's no reason to continue to
discuss it. Yes,
discuss about that when it's like we're very glad we're out of that.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
misery,
yeah,
so.
Right in time. Yeah, I think.
I
think Leovold is a great example of where like the band as a commander list would work well.
Yeah,
because as a 2-card combo, that isn't that like where Leovold is not in the command zone and therefore repeatably castable. I think it's fine. Or as a generic hate bear,
it's also very good. Like it's a very good hate bear.
Yeah. But it has the downside of being in Sultai.
Green says the target.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
It definitely single-handedly makes Green Sun Zenith like 10 times more
also
playable. Also, like you can like Eldritch Evolution to it.
Neoform into it. And...
I mean, it's a little harder to. I mean, you can Neoform Thrasios into it, but like 2-drops are definitely a lot harder to get in play than 1-drops, and much less like feels good to Neoform them.
So I think we said this was going to be a long segment, but on Leovold, I think
yes?
It has a history.
Yeah, it has a history on the podcast.
Lyndon and I finally
it
won.
has a history on the podcast.
We did it, Lyndon.
I know. Just please, God, if I was gonna say, like, if you're a Leovold stan, just unsubscribe from the podcast right now. But no.
Also, okay, one other thing I do want to say on people who publicly advocate for the unbanning of Leovold. Not only is it never going to happen, and I personally think it would be unhealthy, there is no better way to make it look like you actually just don't care about casual players at all than to ask for the unbanning of Leovold. Like,
Leovold is one of the things that I've had this. I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast in regards to banlist philosophy, but I think cards that are they're like cards that are great bans for casual EDH are cards that are accidentally unfun. So Paradox Engine was a great example, same with like Prophet of Krufix, where you can understand why someone would want to do that and not do busted things, right? Like they're playing it, they're like, oh, I want to play my spells with flash and whatever, or I'm trying to Paradox Engine, that's gonna have this synergy or whatever. But they create accidentally unfun games where it's hard to execute on your Paradox Engine combo, or you're taking so many actions per turn with Prophet of Krufix. And Leovold, it's you don't even have to build the Leovold Turbo Wheels deck to be ruining people's fun in casual, right? You play your Leovold deck, and all of a sudden, blanking a ton of aspects of people's decks. Anytime they target any of your stuff, you're drawing cards, so you can't really get them into 1-for-1. And then like anytime you play a wheel, or like anytime you can do something like that, you can just accidentally wipe the table and not have a way to close, and then people are just sitting there drawing off the top of their deck for the rest of the game. Right? You don't have to intentionally build an evil Leovold deck for it to be miserable and casual, and that's why I think it's like a great ban for that, and probably why it's never going to come off.
Dude, that just reminded, the whole unintentionally miserable thing reminded me when I was first starting to, like, I bought a precon, and then me and a bunch of friends brewed decks. One of my friends brewed a Riku deck with Sylvan Primordial in it. It was just like, and like, yeah, he didn't brew the deck being like, I'm just going to turbo Sylvan Primordial every game, but like, it'd be every time he had the option of what it was he was finding and putting into play and copying and blinking and whatever. Wow, it's the Sylvan Primordial. There go my lands.
Yeah. I think Leovold is the one that, of the list we discussed, the unbannables, starting with Arayo all the way through, this is the one that I am most staunchly pro ban. Never have this card come off. And it's also the one that I think is most unlikely to come off.
Yeah. Like, even if you want it unbanned, asking for it just doesn't make you look good.
Pretty much.
I think Leovold is definitely never going to come off the ban list, though I think I'm much more in favor of no Grizzlebrand than no Leovold.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd put Leovold above either of Grizzlebrand or Tolarian Academy. But
I definitely do. Yeah. Okay. And anyone have anything else to say, or we can wrap up this segment?
We're good.
Cool. So that wraps it up for our discussion of cards that are on the ban list and things that we can potentially unban. I don't think it's going to be in our next episode, but we'll definitely be doing a part 2 in, I think, 2 episodes from now.
At some point
so
in the
stay tuned
future.
for that.
Probably not super far in the future.
Yeah, not in the distant future, but not in like the next episode. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And before we close out, so we'll be doing like alternate ban lists and all that kind of just fun discussion. Yeah. So before we close out, we've got everyone's favorite segment, and that is Gut Check.
Yeah, check.
Say it.
Gut check.
Okay, and this week's Gut Check is brought to us by Morgan. So,
and it's, I think, very on theme with this episode, which is, in your ideal world, would the power level of CDH increase, stay the same, or decrease? And to what degree, if you want to add that.
Wait, sorry, decrease what? Increase or decrease what?
The power level.
The power level?
I got mine.
I think there's certain aspects of power that I'd like to address more than others.
There's definitely an element of that, and I recognized that when I created the question. But
yeah, so I'm going to say decrease under the umbrella that I would like to decrease the incidental value of the format with cards like Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora. And by decrease, I mean a 100% decrease of those cards. But otherwise, I think I'm pretty happy with the power level.
I think I would also like to decrease, but I'm not necessarily concerned about the incidental value cards. I'm more concerned about the cards that make the games very swingy. So I'm not a huge fan of Soul Ring or Mana Crypts, and how, a turn 1 crypt into Rhystic Study. Pitching off Matt's what he's talking about. Like, I think Crypt and Soul Ring are just not, like, I think those cards are, similarly powerful to Moxen. So I don't think those cards should be in the format.
I think I would definitely decrease, and for a reason that I've been pretty vocal about. pretty continuously for the past 3 years.
Okay, we're talking about this next.
We are, so we won't go into this a very large amount. But ban fetch lands, they're terrible for the format.
How do you feel about access to colors?
Oh my god.
No, but my get rug draw trigger.
I think they're just
But my
unhealthy.
life of the
They
loam.
should have shut off or assist in shutting off one of the main points of counterplay for high color decks in the format. And I would like to introduce more counterplay, i.e., making Blood Moon and Mana Hate stronger. So that's why my power levels would go down.
Problem is I totally agree with, like, as much as, like, I love Get Rock, and I love fetch lands and Life from the Loam and all the value shenanigans, but like I agree that I would love to see fetch lands go and how that, you know, brings some of the power level of 4-color and stuff in line, but like I could never see that as a prescription for EDH as a whole, because I think
it's a different
the
format.
fetch lands, yeah. The fetch lands, what fetch lands do for like casual and mid power EDH, like the lands archetypes really like using and abusing
I
those.
fully acknowledge that.
I think that's a good
Here's
part
what they
of
should do.
EDH.
They should just ban on-color fetch lands.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
It actually, I've looked into it. It doesn't do as much as you'd like.
Huh?
I don't think.
What?
I think it does exactly what I'd like it to do.
Yeah, that sounds pretty
Like, I think
effective.
I would like to skew 3-color more
What?
than
No. Anything
than
that
it hurts,
contains colors that you're in.
No, sorry.
Oh,
No, I
just-
meant like
I was
it has to have one
Oh,
color that
sure.
you don't have.
Yeah, still
So
fair.
like,
okay.
so like Thrasius and Timna can run all the red fetches.
Okay, well, what if they banned fetches and then printed 1-color fetches?
Like,
All
I don't know.
right.
Like, does Thrasius and Timnus only like being able to run 4 fetch lands? Like, does that actually? I mean, even if they're bad
For
fetch lands,
terrible
even if they're
fetch
bad,
lands.
like you get to run dual lands that like they
No,
still
it's-
are. Like,
Yes, it matters because each of those
Yeah.
fetch lands is fundamentally like a 2-color. Like you get the color it is and one other color, not like this massive array of 2-color. Like you
it
can
nerfs them, but I don't think it nerfs them as much as I
Well,
would.
keep in- like-
yeah.
currently the deck. Most iterations of the deck don't even run Arid Mesa.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so like Arid Mesa is like really not a great card in that deck, and like
I just would like to see, like, ideally in CDH, I would like to see like all like Thrasius Timna not be able to run a single fetch land. Like, I agree with
All
you.
right, Morgan, what you
Well,
got?
That's what. Yeah.
I was just trying to preserve like
Yeah.
the fact that Gitrog wants fetch lands. I would also say decrease, but again on a slightly different axis than everyone else, which is I think it just needs to be a little bit harder to win the game. Like particularly, I think that if the costs and card requirements of the commander-centric combos were comparable to where the commander-agnostic combos are now, and then the commander-agnostic combos cost a little bit more, that would be a lot better in my mind.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that. I like that. Okay. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at Into the North Pod, via our email intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. Next, special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a Patreon, we are at patreon.com/northpodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, and to our long-suffering podcast editor Roadkill. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
Bye.
Peace.
Have a good
Stay tuned for part 2.